Chapter 374. Thinking of this, he immediately opened his mailbox in the forum and found the email sent by Niefeng. Then, he clicked on the profile picture of the Syrian player, and chose to add him as a friend. Now, he was at a loss as to how to destroy the evil formation. Moreover, Yuenshu should have discovered the broken boundary point and would definitely repair it to speed up the refinement of the evil formation. Yuenshu might even become more vigilant and station troops at each boundary point to prevent the same thing from happening again. Therefore, to Hu He, destroying the demonic formation had become a very difficult task. Even if he managed to avoid Yuenshu's troops and entered the evil formation, it was still uncertain whether he could destroy the evil formation with just Mo Su's head. However, things were different now. After knowing that there was such a malignant player like Niefeng and learning about his alchemy, he felt that he could cooperate with him to blow up the entire evil formation and eliminate any future troubles. While waiting, Niefeng accepted his friend request. He clicked on the dialogue box with anticipation. He, Brother Niefeng, I have a big deal here and I need your help. Niefeng, F***ck, the great demon king added me as a friend. Scary, fearful eyes. JPG, He, what's there to be afraid of? Tonggua's confused face. Niefeng, you're the malignant great demon king. When you first entered the game, it happened to be the evil calamity. As a newbie, I was really miserable, wiping tears. I really wanted to stab you. He, you're the malignant great demon king, flustered and exasperated emoji. Speaking of which, do you want to help me? Niefeng, great demon king, I'm sorry, I really don't have time. I have to find a way to repay my debt. A few big guilds said that they don't want to repay, but a few small guilds are broke. Their spiritual materials are basically all in storage. Although they also said that they don't need to repay, they can't live with their conscience. Recently, I've been preparing to refine exploding pills and sell them for money to repay my debt. He, good job. But if you come with me and do this, you'll be rich immediately. I guarantee that you'll be able to repay your debt and even have a surplus. Niefeng, what's the matter? Don't tell me you're going to cause trouble again. I'm very kind, fearful look. He, am I that kind of person? Exasperated emoji. This time, I'm going to destroy the evil demon formation. You've seen the livestream. The evil demon formation is too sturdy. It's basically impossible to destroy it with brute force. But with you, there won't be a problem. When the time comes, there will be many big guilds in the European server funding this. Niefeng, I think I understand what you want me to do, but I can't control the effects of the drug. Last time it was extraordinary. I can't do it now. He, how would you know if you don't try? Young man, the organization needs you. Don't hesitate. You're about to save the entire European server. Niefeng, let me think about it. Please wait. After Niefeng said that he would consider it, he waited anxiously. Now, he was afraid that Niefeng would disagree. After all, Niefeng was the core of the plan he had come up with. Without him, he would have to think of another way. About half an hour later, he noticed a notification in the chat box. He immediately opened it and saw that it was Niefeng's reply. Great Demon King, I'll join your organization. Let's destroy the world together. No, let's save the world. Seeing this reply, he couldn't help but laugh. He immediately replied to Niefeng, asking him to come to the land of Tsangshu from the Ghost Mountains and come to his aid. After receiving the reply, he opened his friend list again. He found a European servers guild group and clicked in. Then, he told them about Niefeng's participation in the group. He also mentioned that destroying the demonic formation required a lot of spiritual materials, so he needed funding from all the major guilds. In response to He's request, the guild leaders in the group immediately expressed that they had no problem with it. They also asked how many spiritual materials he needed. He wasn't sure about this, so he looked for Niefeng to ask about the amount of spiritual materials he needed to refine the nuclear bomb. Niefeng's reply was only 4 words. The more, the better. Seeing this reply, he felt helpless. Hence, he replied the same sentence in the European Servers Guild group. The guild leaders didn't reject his request. After all, this matter concerned the entire land of Tsangshu. If the entire land of Tsangshu was really occupied by Yuanshu, their losses would be irreparable. They might even have nowhere to go when the time came. After all, Baiki was the territory of the original players. Although everyone was a player, due to the competitive relationship, conflicts were inevitable. They would definitely be the target of expulsion by the Baiki players. Hence, he was their life-saving straw. Naturally, the need for a large amount of spiritual materials was not a problem. Many guilds started to get busy immediately. Even the small guilds began to look for their guild members to gather spiritual materials together. The price of spiritual materials in the European servers' auction house began to soar. In about half a day, the price of spiritual materials in the European server had actually increased by 1/3. One had to know that the price of spiritual materials was basically stable now. This kind of increase made many clueless casual players who needed spiritual materials tremble with fear. They almost had a mental breakdown. They thought that the price of the entire European server was going to skyrocket and that poor people like them were going to be finished. In half a day, as he waited, nearly 50,000 spiritual materials had been sent to his account in the form of mail. At this moment, he felt that he was really rich. However, these spiritual materials were not provided for him. They were provided for the malignant bomber that he was preparing to receive. At this moment, he was at the border between the land of Tsangshu and the Ghost Mountains, waiting for Niefeng's arrival. In the meantime, Niefeng kept sending his coordinates to him to report his location. At this moment, the two of them were less than a kilometer apart. At this moment, he was a little expectant. What did Niefeng look like? Did he have 3 heads and 6 arms? Otherwise, how could he have such terrifying lethality and be such a malignant tumor? After a while, Niefeng's figure appeared in his sight. To his disappointment, he did not have 3 heads and 6 arms. He was just a gentle young man. He could not help but pout. He felt that Niefeng's appearance did not match his title of malignant bomber at all. He was so weak. Seeing he's beckoning, Niefeng immediately quickened his pace and jogged to his side. Great Demon King? Bomber? Then, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Everything was said without words. Is this the land of Tsangshu? I've never been here before. I've only seen it in videos. Niefeng seemed a little curious. There's nothing much to see. It's just that the scenery is different and the environment is different. Everything else is similar. After all, Tsangshu and Baiki are adjacent to each other. In comparison, the difference between the Hell server and the Asia server is bigger. I'll have to visit it when I'm free in the future. Then the players from the 2 servers will have a headache. Niefeng suddenly stopped talking. He could clearly feel the murderous aura coming from he. Let's go to Hidden Dragon Village first. There's a teleportation point there that leads directly to the demonic domain. Then, we'll go straight to Spectral Dragon Tomb. I'm afraid that something will happen if we delay. He said. At this moment, he was still a little worried. After all, he could not grasp the specific time needed for the demonic formation to refine those Ghost Emperor-level masters. In other words, danger could come at any time. Hence, his heart was filled with a sense of urgency. Niefeng nodded immediately. He did not know why. Perhaps it was because there were too many legends about he the Great Demon King, but when he faced he felt a faint sense of fear. Then, he brought Niefeng to Hidden Dragon Village. Along the way, Niefeng's eyes kept looking around. Obviously, it was his first time in the land of Tsangshu, so he was filled with curiosity. After arriving at Hidden Dragon Village, The completely different style of buildings attracted Niefeng even more. He even had the urge to stop and admire it and study it. Of course, this was decisively stopped by Hu He. Along the way, Niefeng gave Hu He the feeling that he was curious about everything. He wanted to study everything and maintained a curious attitude. At this moment, Hu He finally understood why Niefeng was so good at refining medicine. He was simply a scholar who was always thinking about how to acquire knowledge. However, he had gone astray and actually walked the path of a bomber. Along the way, the two of them chatted as they walked. After 2 teleportations and half a day of rushing, they finally arrived at the area where the black light barrier was located. At this moment, Hu He waved his hand and summoned his zombie spirits, getting ready for battle. After all, as long as Yuanxu was cautious enough, he would definitely not let the same thing happen twice. It was very likely that he would send troops to guard the place. Seeing more than 20 zombie spirits summoned by Hu He, Niefeng's curiosity was aroused again. He stepped in front of one of the zombie spirits and began to size it up curiously. Amazing, you're actually at the half-step Ghost King realm. There aren't many players with the strength of a Ghost Commander now, but you actually have more than 20 half-step Ghost Kings. You're invincible. Niefeng was a little excited. Hu He rolled his eyes. These are my brothers, don't touch them. Niefeng nodded, then turned his head to look at Hu He and said with some anticipation, Great Demon King, can I learn how to refine zombies? Hearing this, Hu He, who was about to answer, no problem, suddenly realized something and quickly coughed twice. Ahem, there's nothing much to learn. It's very hard, and if your mental fortitude isn't good enough, you'll be scared to death. I think my mental fortitude is pretty good. Niefeng blinked. Good my ass. Hu He cursed in his heart. If it was someone else, Hu He wouldn't have said anything. But to Niefeng, he really didn't want to teach him how to refine zombies. After learning about Niefeng's deeds, he knew that this kid's refining skills could not be described as just unreliable. He was completely destroying things. He was afraid that if he taught Niefeng how to refine zombies, he would come up with a self-destructing zombie spirit routine. Then, the reputation of the zombie forge master would be ruined in his hand. Therefore, Hu He rejected him righteously. The reason was that it was for his own good and he was afraid that Niefeng would be scared to death. Although Niefeng wanted to refute this, he still had some idea in his heart. He could only withdraw his request with a bitter face. Niefeng still felt that refining medicine and refining zombies were different. It might not necessarily explode. Chapter 375. Returning to the area where the black light barrier was located, Hu He could not help but be vigilant. This time, he did not choose the central point of the barrier that he destroyed previously. Instead, he chose a different direction to prevent any accident. Follow me. Looking at Niefeng, who was looking up at the black light barrier, Hu He felt a headache coming on. He still felt that this guy was not very reliable. Oh. Hearing Hu He's shout, Niefeng immediately followed. The two of them walked to the front of the barrier. Hu He first took out the world-shattering dagger and began to search for the location of the next central point of the barrier. After confirming the location, he brought Niefeng along and sprinted towards the central point of the barrier. After a half-hour journey, when they were close to the central point of the barrier, Hu He suddenly stopped and quickly pulled Niefeng to squat down. What's wrong? Niefeng squatted down and asked softly. There are soldiers stationed in front, right beside the barrier. It's just as I guessed. Hu He said with a serious expression. What should we do? Niefeng was also a little nervous after hearing Hu He's words. Let's check their strength first. As long as they are not at the Ghost King level, I can handle them. As he spoke, Hu He pushed aside the withered weeds beside him and quietly poked his head out to look at the soldiers in the distance. Analysis ability activated. Game notification. Target is too far away, unable to check. Seeing the game notification, Hu He could not help but be stunned. Actually, the soldiers in the distance were just a few black dots in his eyes. However, he did not expect that he could not analyze the target's information at such a distance. Hu He could not help but feel a little depressed. How is it? Are they strong? Niefeng shrunk his head and asked nervously. I can't see clearly, but why do you look a little scared? Hu He looked at Niefeng and curled his lips. I'm a lifestyle player, I don't fight much. Niefeng answered immediately. A lifestyle player who blew up the mansion of the dead? A Syrian lifestyle player? Hu He suddenly felt that Niefeng's words sounded so shameless. He was obviously a malignant player, but he still wanted to disguise himself as a kind lifestyle player. Was there still any law? Niefeng heard this and immediately put on a bitter face. He did not speak, but he felt extremely wronged. Just then, Hu He said, Wait for me here, I'll go check out the situation. Wait for my news. Niefeng nodded and continued to shrink his body. Seeing this, Hu He first kept all the zombie spirits behind him into the zombie soul bag. Then, he began to move forward slowly like a cat. The closer they got to the area where the soldiers were stationed, the more nervous Hu He became. After all, they did not have much time left. If they missed this opportunity, the consequences would be dire. While approaching the soldiers, Hu He activated his analysis ability from time to time. As he was unsure of the maximum range of the analysis ability, he could only try again and again. After advancing a certain distance, Hu He tapped on the analysis function again. This time, the information of the soldiers stationed at the front appeared. Soul Snatcher, late-stage Ghost Commander. Character details: subordinate of the Soulless Tribe in the Yuanshu Army. Has the special ability to steal souls. Character status: Normal Ghost Soldier Guard, Mid-Ghost Commander. Character details: Elder of the Soulless Tribe under the Yuanshu Army. Expert in Physical and Blood Elementalist. Strong in close combat. Using his analysis ability, Hu He quickly understood the strength of the garrison soldiers. Although there were dozens of people in front of him, the strongest among them was only a soul snatcher in the advanced stage of the Ghost Supreme Commander realm. To Hu He, it was still very easy to deal with them. This time, he did not panic. He slowly stood up and walked toward the garrison soldiers. The moment he showed his head, the soldiers immediately glanced at him with a vigilant look on their faces. Who is it? The Soul Snatcher priest shouted at Hu He from afar. Hu He did not answer and continued to walk forward calmly. Seeing Hu He's attitude, the garrison soldiers all showed a vigilant look on their faces. They were not stupid. Since Yuanshu had sent them to guard this place, it was obvious that there was danger. Although Hu He was only one person, if he did not have the strength, how would he dare to approach them so calmly? This is our king's territory. If you dare to come any closer, we won't be polite anymore. The leader of the priests shouted angrily. At this moment, Hu He was extremely calm. More than 20 of his underlings were all half-step ghost kings. It would be a piece of cake for them to bully these ghost supreme commanders. Therefore, a heroic spirit rose in his heart and he continued to walk forward calmly. This undoubtedly made the garrison soldiers even more nervous. Priest, do you want to send a signal? The ghost soldier asked. To be on the safe side, although every boundary point was guarded by a ghost supreme commander, the captain of each garrison had a psychic lamp that could transmit signals. As long as he extinguished the lamp, Yuanshu and the Ghost Kings in the Spectral Dragon Tomb would receive the message and rush over to support them. Seeing that Hu He was getting closer, the ghost soldier could not help but ask the priest nervously. No hurry, let's test his strength. As he spoke, the priest pointed the staff in his hand at Hu He and murmured an incantation. Circles of black light emerged from the tip of the staff and attacked Hu He. Seeing that they were about to attack, Hu He did not hesitate and decisively summoned more than 20 of his underlings. The appearance of these zombie spirits really frightened the soldiers stationed here. At this moment, the black light wave approached. Under Hu He's command, the zombie spirits immediately stood in a row in front of him. However, what Hu He did not expect was that the black light wave would mysteriously pass through the zombie spirits' bodies and hit him in an instant. Haha, return of the soul! Upon seeing this, the priest gently shook the tip of the staff and began to absorb Hu He's soul. Hearing this, Hu He was shocked. He did not expect that this person's attack was not a physical attack. He was done for. However, what surprised Hu He was that after a few seconds, nothing happened to his body. At this moment, the game notification appeared. Game notification: attacked by soul assimilation. This attack is ineffective and has been exempted. Seeing the game notification, Hu He let out a sigh of relief. Then, with a ferocious expression, he waved his hand at the priest and the others who were standing in front of the black light barrier. Beat them up, beat them to death! Upon hearing Hu He's command, more than 20 half-naked zombie spirits immediately dashed towards the soldiers stationed there. These zombie spirits were all Ghost King-level experts when they were alive. Even though they were refined into zombie spirits, their physical strength was still extremely strong. In a flash, they arrived in front of the priest, the ghost soldier, and the other garrison soldiers. The leading priest was shocked and immediately raised his staff to meet them. Bang! With a muffled sound, the priest's staff collided with Cha Na's zombie spirit's fist. At this time, Cha Na's zombie spirit had already attained the strength of a half-step Ghost King after Hu He's repeated refinement. In a contest of pure strength, the priest was instantly sent flying. 24 half-step Ghost Kings attacked at the same time. Be it in terms of strength or numbers, they crushed the garrison soldiers. At the moment of collision, be it the priest, the ghost soldier, or the other soldiers, all of them were sent flying and crashed into the black light barrier. At this moment, the old priest did not hesitate. He immediately took out the psychic lamp and crushed it with force. The lamp was extinguished in an instant. At the same time, far away in the central area of the mysterious dragon tomb, Yuenshu, who was comprehending the formation knowledge, he learned from the demonic formation with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes. Knowing that something had happened to the barrier, he suddenly stood up and said to the Ghost Kings who were sitting at the side and comprehending the formation knowledge with him, "Something has happened to the barrier. All of you go there quickly. I'll go to the demonic formation now to check the situation." "Yes, my king," the Ghost Kings at the side replied respectfully. Then, they got up and rushed toward the barrier point that Yuenshu had pointed out. After Hu He broke the barrier point last time, Yuenshu knew that the demonic formation was no longer safe. However, he did not expect that the trouble at the barrier point this time was still related to Hu He. At the same time that the priest crushed the psychic lamp, Hu He's expression suddenly changed. He had seen this kind of psychic lamp in the ancient books. It was specially used for communication and had many uses. According to the records, this kind of lamp was also the nemesis of the zombie forge masters. This was because some special psychic lamps were specially used to guard tombs. As long as a tomb robber entered a tomb chamber with a special psychic lamp, the lamp would automatically extinguish and convey the news to the descendants of the tomb owner or the tomb keeper. In the secret skill of zombie spirit sect that his grandfather passed to him, there was a special page that described this lamp in detail. At this moment, Hu He realized that things were not looking good. If Yuenshu really came, the mission would definitely fail. He immediately shouted in the team voice chat, "Bomberman, come here quickly. Bomberman, hurry up and come over here. We have to hurry." After shouting, Hu He raised his hand and pointed at the priest and the others. "Leave no one alive, kill them all." When the zombie spirits heard this, their attacks became more ferocious. The priest and the soldiers could only defend bitterly. However, at this moment, they did not dare to retreat. If they did, then Yuenshu would definitely not let them go. While the zombie spirits were fighting with the priest and the others, Hu He also quickly walked to the front of the black light barrier. He began to use energy sensing to measure the energy value and determine the specific location of the barrier's central point. After about 5 minutes, he found the area with the strongest energy fluctuation and decisively stabbed the world-shattering dagger into it. The barrier point immediately began to collapse, revealing a circular hole with a diameter of 3 meters. At this time, Niefeng also trotted to his side. "Follow me in. Time is of the essence," he said as he stepped into the wizardry barrier. "What about them?" Niefeng asked, pointing at the zombie spirits who were still fighting with the priest and the others. "Don't worry about them. Hurry up and go to the demonic formation, or else Yuanxiu may come," he said anxiously. At this moment, Niefeng also realized that something seemed to be wrong. He quickly followed he into the tunnel inside the barrier. Then, the two of them began to walk quickly toward the demonic formation in the tunnel. While moving forward, Niefeng could not help but ask, "Great Demon King, if I were Yuanxiu, I would directly go to the demonic formation and wait for him when I receive the news that someone has broken the seal. Anyway, I'm the strongest in the land of Tsangshu. No one can defeat me. Why would I go to the barrier point to look for you?" Hearing this, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Niefeng suddenly knocked his head on he's back. Yes, Yuanxiu's strength was the strongest in the land of Tsangshu. Other than the evil king, there was no one who could rival him. Why would he go through so much trouble to look for him? Niefeng's words suddenly made he realize that Yuanxiu was probably already waiting for their arrival in the demonic formation. F***CK. What should we do? I'm afraid we're going to fail again. Thinking of this, he could not help but curse. I have an idea, Niefeng chuckled at this moment. Hurry up and release it. Look at the time, you damn tumor. Looking at Niefeng's thoughtful look, he really wanted to refine him into a zombie spirit and whip his corpse. Chapter 376. It's actually very simple. Think about it, who in the land of Tsangshu can fight against Yuanxiu now? You mean the evil king? He's only a beginner ghost emperor, he can only fight against Yuanxiu. There's still a gap in strength, he said in shock. We don't need the evil king to fight against Yuanxiu. Instead, we need him to lead the players to attack the barrier, or even the spectral dragon tomb. In the land of Tsangshu, who else do you think is a match for the evil king other than Yuanxiu? As long as he makes a move, Yuanxiu will definitely stop him and buy us enough time. Good idea. You're quite smart, you damn malignant tumor. After understanding Niefeng's intention, he suddenly realized that this plan was totally feasible. I just read a lot. Niefeng scratched his head and revealed a shy look. Seeing this, he couldn't help but raise his middle finger, feeling that this damn malignant tumor was really good at acting. Then, he decisively opened the live streaming channel. While walking towards the demonic formation with Niefeng, he began to contact the players through the live streaming channel, asking them to look for the evil king and prepare to organize a wave of feint attacks. At this time, most of the European server players were paying attention to he's movements. Seeing that he had opened the live streaming channel, countless players immediately swarmed in. After hearing he's request, a large number of European server players responded to the call and began to look for the evil king. At this time, the evil king was in the ruins of the ruins, drinking the fine wine he bought from the game's auction house, enjoying the feeling of having a physical body with a satisfied look on his face. At this time, a large number of players suddenly came to him. This made the evil king a little confused, but after understanding the player's request, he suddenly felt a little worried. You want me to fight against Yuanxiu? Isn't this bullying him? Even if I give him a handicap of 2 hands, he still won't be a match for me. However, the evil king was still very friendly towards the players, so he sent this request back to Lu Wu. After receiving the message from the evil king, Lu Wu immediately replied. Only the original beginner Ghost Emperor strength is allowed, new god level strength is not allowed. From Lu Wu's point of view, the evil king's strength had already reached the god level. If he was really allowed to display his strength, the players' mentality would change in the future. In the future, they would seek help from the evil king whenever they encountered a problem. This was what Lu Wu wanted to see. After all, the development of the players was the most important, and all the dangers were meant to temper them. After receiving Lu Wu's reply, the evil king immediately decided to bring the players to the black light barrier to fight Lu Wu. Through the bullet screen in the live streaming channel, who was on his way to the demonic formation, knew that the evil king had agreed. Both of them immediately hastened their pace towards the demonic formation. After the previous experience, he knew that it would take at least half a day for him and Nie Feng to reach the evil spirit formation. Therefore, he began to communicate with the players through the livestream to obtain information from the outside world. Half an hour later, he received feedback from the players in the live streaming channel. They had assembled and were on their way to the black light barrier. At this moment, he was slightly excited. As long as Yuanxu was gone, the chances of blowing up the evil spirit array would be greater. After another 4 hours of hurrying, he stopped when he felt that he was close to the demonic formation. He waited for the players' final feedback. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the huge army of players was approaching the black light barrier through the teleportation point to the demonic realm. When they were about to reach the black light barrier, the evil king's figure separated from the army of players and floated into the air. Then, he turned into a stone statue in the air and crashed into the black light barrier. Of course, the evil king was using his beginner ghost emperor strength instead of his divine power. Boom! The collision caused the black light barrier to shake violently, forming waves of energy ripples that spread to the surroundings of the barrier. Boom! The evil king's second collision arrived and energy ripples formed again at the point of impact in the distance. When the soldiers stationed here saw the appearance of the energy ripples, their expressions immediately tensed up. Immediately after, a group of soldiers hurriedly rushed in the direction of the ripples, wanting to see who exactly was the audacious bastard that destroyed the barrier. However, when they saw the specific situation, they were shocked because the one who was destroying the barrier was the powerful evil king. Not far away, the densely packed army of players was slowly advancing. At this moment, the soldiers stationed at the place did not hesitate and immediately took out the psychic lamp that they carried with them. Then, they injected a strand of their consciousness into the psychic lamp and decisively crushed it. Yuanxu, who was in the evil spirit formation, immediately received the feedback from the soldiers. However, it was different this time because the feedback from the soldiers was, "The evil king's army is attacking, the mysterious dragon tomb is in trouble." Seeing this message, Yuanxu could not help but frown. The arrival of the evil king at this moment was definitely not good news. However, if he did not rush over to support them, no one in the defense force would be a match for the evil king. When the barrier was broken, the mysterious dragon tomb would be in trouble and it might even be taken over. After thinking about it, Yuanxu clenched his teeth, flicked his sleeves and turned back. While rushing to the mysterious dragon tomb, Yuanxu's heart was surging with anger. Now that his injuries had fully recovered, he must capture the evil king and seal him again. After Yuanxu left the evil spirit formation, he and Nie Feng, who were in another tunnel, still did not move. This was because they had not received any feedback from the players. If they continued to move forward, it would be very unsafe and it was very likely that they would meet Yuanxu. While waiting anxiously, he and Nie Feng did not chat. In their hearts, they were hoping that Yuanxu would take the bait. At this moment, a bullet screen floated by in the live streaming room. "Great Demon King, it's done. Yuanxu is really here. Now that he is fighting with the evil king, we are also fighting with Yuanxu's subordinate. They have too many ghost kings, we can't hold them off. You guys can do it." Seeing this message, he and Nie Feng's eyes lit up and immediately walked toward the end of the tunnel. In order to destroy the evil spirit formation, they had gone through several setbacks. This time, Hu He was determined to destroy it. After another half an hour of rushing, when they appeared at the corner, Hu He knew that they had entered the area where the evil spirit formation was located. After passing through the corner, a cave shrouded in blue light appeared in front of them. Is this the evil spirit formation? Niefeng asked curiously as he looked at the huge formation that covered the entire cave. Yes, let's go to the central area. It's all up to you this time. Hu He answered immediately. The two of them strode to the center of the evil spirit formation. Then, Hu He confirmed that Niefeng chose to trade and traded all the spiritual materials in the space. Bomberman, don't make any mistakes. This time, there are so many brothers from the European server who are fighting for us outside. Upon hearing this, Niefeng nodded solemnly and took out a red and gilded alchemy furnace from the space. This alchemy furnace was specially made by the #1 blacksmith, Lin Tai. It was one of the rare 4th-grade alchemy furnaces among the players, and it was also the key to his refining of the nuclear bomb this time. After turning on the switch, the flaming stone in the alchemy furnace suddenly began to glow and emit raging flames. After the flames stabilized, Niefeng began to take out spiritual materials and threw them into the furnace. The inside of the alchemy furnace was a self-contained space, so it was not a problem to throw in a large number of medicinal materials. Under the high temperature of the flames, the medicinal materials began to gradually melt. Actually, Niefeng did not know how to refine the nuclear bomb. He only had one way, and that was to follow the normal step. In short, it would definitely explode. Beside him, Hu He knew that he could not help much, so he once again looked at Mo Su's corpse that was sitting cross-legged. Since there was still a small bottle of corpse dissolving water left, he wanted to see if he could remove another arm. As time passed, Hu He, who was removing Mo Su's arm, was suddenly startled by Niefeng's exclamation. What's wrong? This place is very strange, too strange. When refining medicine here, all the medicinal liquid quickly turned black. It's exactly the same as the medicinal liquid that formed during the explosion of the Mansion of the Dead. Upon hearing this, Hu He was a little stunned. Isn't this normal? Which time have you not refined medicine like this? It's not the same. In the past, it was done step by step, but this time, it directly turned black after melting. Niefeng was very shocked. Is there a problem? Hu He asked nervously. After all, the explosion of the evil spirit formation depended entirely on Niefeng. If he made a mistake, it would all be over. No, there are only benefits. I reckon that the explosion will become even more powerful, Niefeng said happily. It could be said that this was the first time he felt happy about the impending explosion of medicine refinement. Actually, what Niefeng did not know was that his body was branded with the Dark Precept imprint. The evil spirit formation was currently the transmission point for the dark light barrier to absorb the dark energy. It happened to be the same energy that Niefeng absorbed when refining medicine. At this moment, what Niefeng could not see was that the surrounding dark energy was surging madly into the medicine refining furnace. It continuously integrated into the medicinal liquid and changed the internal energy structure of the medicinal liquid. That was why Niefeng found it strange. With the support of the dark energy, as more and more spiritual materials were poured into the medicine refining furnace, the medicine refining furnace began to tremble. Upon seeing this, Niefeng began to concentrate on controlling the medicine refining furnace, separating the medicinal liquid inside. The final process of medicine refinement was to fuse the medicinal liquid. However, this time, Niefeng had to separate the medicinal liquid. Otherwise, he was worried that if too much medicinal liquid gathered together, it would cause an explosion. Time passed bit by bit. Niefeng's forehead began to drip with sweat. Hu He, who was beside him, had also stopped destroying the void demon. He stood at the side with a nervous expression, not daring to breathe loudly as he waited for the earth-shattering moment to arrive. It's almost done, almost done. Niefeng's face was deathly pale, his lips trembling as he spoke. At this moment, the medicinal liquid in the medicine refining furnace had been separated into 10,000 portions. Other than Niefeng, no other apothecary player could achieve this level of control. Did you succeed? Hu He asked nervously. If I let go now, the medicinal liquid will fuse. It's going to explode. I can't control it. At this moment, the medicinal liquid had already begun to permeate the isolation zone created by Niefeng. It was gathering towards the center bit by bit, making Niefeng extremely nervous. At this moment, Niefeng suddenly turned to look at Hu He. Are you ready? Hu He was stunned. What? Before he could finish his sentence, he saw Niefeng's body trembling as he took a step back. At this moment, all the medicinal liquid had gathered at the center. The medicine refining furnace instantly turned red and began to crack in less than 3 seconds. Countless rays of black light shot out from the cracks on the medicine refining furnace. Explode! Niefeng roared. However, Hu He was not prepared at all. He was instantly swallowed by the black light while he was still in a daze. If he could, he really wanted to give Niefeng the middle finger. He had a feeling that this guy was doing this on purpose. He was extremely evil. Boom! The medicine refining furnace exploded. Black light filled the entire cave in an instant. The raging dark energy storm continuously absorbed the rich dark energy in the surroundings, becoming more and more violent. The entire cave began to collapse. At this moment, the blue crystal in the center of the demonic formation was also being corroded by dark energy. The blue crystal was also dyed black. At this moment, a few game notifications suddenly popped up in Hu He and Niefeng's minds. Game notification: you have been corroded by dark energy. You will lose 80,000 HP per second. Game notification: you have been engulfed by dark energy. You will lose 100,000 HP per second. Game notification: dark energy explosion brewing. Game notification: you have obtained the blessing of the evil demon god's remnant power. Dark damage has been isolated. Game notification: you have obtained the demonic crystal protection. Dark damage has been isolated. Under Hu He and Niefeng's dumbfounded expression, the demonic formation on the ground suddenly began to tremble. Then, it actually broke away from the ground and formed a semicircular protective layer. Then, it slowly floated up into the air, carrying them up into the sky. At this moment, what Niefeng and Hu He did not know was that the formation of such violent energy had already activated the protection circle that the evil demon god had set up in the demonic formation. This was originally a backup plan that he had left for himself. He did not expect that it would now help Hu He and Niefeng. The demonic formation rose higher and higher. Gradually, it came into contact with the ceiling of the cave. Bit by bit, it broke through the rock layer and began to float up into the sky. Boom! At this moment, the brewing dark energy storm finally exploded. The explosive power formed by the violent power of the rule was even more terrifying than a nuclear bomb. In an instant, the demonic formation shook violently. The demonic formation that was floating up broke through the rock layer and began to float up like a rocket. At this moment, Niefeng and Hu He felt like they were going to die. Under the recoil, their bodies felt like they were going to fall apart. Their HP was dropping rapidly. However, at this moment, the protection circle began to protect their bodies, isolating them from the shock. Only then did the two of them manage to pull through. In the outside world, the evil king, who had already killed his way into the spectral dragon tomb, was fighting with Yuanshu. Fighting with Yuanshu again, the evil king felt a little helpless. This feeling was as if he was a king, but he had to pretend to be bronze to fight against Yuanshu. He even had to pretend that he was no match for Yuanshu. At this moment, the ground shook violently. Then, the ground began to collapse. A blue formation broke out from the ground. In an instant, the players and Yuanshu's soldiers in that area were torn apart by the violent power. At this moment, the demonic formation that was protecting Hu He and Nie Feng finally exhausted the last of its energy. The protective layer dissipated and the blue crystal turned white. Finally, it produced a push force that threw Hu He and Nie Feng out. At this moment, the corpses of the experts, who were also protected in the formation, were also thrown out the moment the demonic formation collapsed. While the evil king, Yuanshu, and the players were astonished, Hu He's maniacal laughter suddenly came from the sky. Ha 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 ha. Yuanshu, look, your dad has been blown away. Ha 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 ha. At this moment, Yuanshu was dumbfounded, obviously unable to react. Ha ha ha, Yuanshu, your dad has been blown away. At this moment, the evil king, who was fighting with Yuanshu, could not help but laugh out loud. F***ck Yuanshu, your dad has flown the furthest. That's awesome, ha 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 ha. Hu He's maniacal laughter was heard again. Hearing this, Yuanshu's face gradually turned the color of a pig's liver. Chapter 377. After the demonic formation fell apart, Hu He, Nie Feng, and the dozens of powerhouses' remains were thrown out by the final push, flying freely in the air. Compared to Nie Feng's calmness, Hu He seemed a little arrogant. He pointed at the corpse that flew the furthest away and kept provoking Yuanshu. Hu He felt extremely carefree at this moment. He had died in Yuanshu's hands several times before. This time, he finally saw Yuanshu being defeated. He felt extremely satisfied and his laughter became more and more unbridled. Seeing this scene, Yuanshu's heart was boiling with anger. Roar! All of you die! While roaring, Yuanshu's figure flashed, and he was about to dash toward Hu He. At this moment, the evil king blocked his way. Yuanshu, don't rush. Let your father fly for a while longer. Hearing this, Yuanshu's face turned green. He immediately punched at the evil king, and a black hexagram formation instantly appeared on the back of his hand. As the punch was thrown, the wind howled and a ferocious-looking black dragon emerged from the fist wind. It swallowed the evil king into its stomach in one gulp. Go to hell! Then Yuanshu clenched his fist hard. The black dragon roared at the sky and its body collapsed. It kept squeezing inwards, binding the evil king tightly and suppressing his body. At this time, Yuanshu's injuries had completely recovered and his strength was much stronger than before. His explosive combat power shocked the evil king. However, the evil king, whose body was squeezed in the black dragon's body, was also a little depressed. Although this force could not hurt him at all, he could not resist at all because Lu Wu had instructed him not to use any power above the beginner Ghost Emperor realm. However, with his previous strength, he could not resist this force at all. Therefore, the evil king could only helplessly shrink in the black dragon's body and feel the pressure coming from all directions. After controlling the evil king, the hostility on Yuanshu's face intensified. Anger burned in his chest as if it was about to burst out. This time, he could have relied on the ancient evil demon god's formation to obtain an invincible zombie army, but he did not expect the outcome to turn out like this. Originally, he thought that the zombie army plan would definitely succeed. Even if there were twists and turns along the way, it would definitely not go wrong. It was not because Yuanshu was conceited, but because he had truly considered all the possible risk factors. First, there was the guarantee of the sentient spirit lamp. Once the barrier was destroyed, he would receive urgent news. Even if there was a mistake with him in the evil spirit matrix, all the invading enemies would not be his opponents, including the evil king. Even when he received the news that the evil king had invaded and led his army to attack the mysterious dragon tomb, he still considered whether someone would sneak into the evil formation to destroy it when he left the evil formation. However, Yuanshu quickly denied this speculation. First of all, the formation eye crystal of the evil spirit formation was already under his control. Only someone with the same strength as him could take it away. In the land of Tsangshu, no one with the same strength as him existed, including the evil king in his eyes. Secondly, when he had found the evil spirit array, he had also studied and studied it. He had discovered that even with his strength, he was unable to destroy the evil spirit array. With these two almost unbreakable guarantees, in order to prevent the spectral dragon tomb from being conquered, Yuenshu left with a peace of mind. However, the result was something he had never expected. The furious Yuenshu still could not figure out how the formation was destroyed. After all, it was a divine formation created by the evil demon god. At that moment, he turned his gaze to the crack in the ground that was broken by the evil spirit array. At that moment, the crack was still spewing out thick black light. The law of darkness was gradually spreading and diluting in the air. The law of darkness. Yuenshu's expression suddenly became solemn. How did he do it? Thinking of this, he immediately turned his gaze to he who was falling from the sky. He gave up on controlling the evil king and dashed towards he. Yuenshu felt that he was really going to be driven crazy by he who was resurrected again. When he released him from the dungeon seal, he thought that he was his lucky star, so he did not kill him before he left. However, he did not expect he to repay him with several big gifts very quickly. The first time was when the natural disaster ran rampant in the land of Tsangshu, causing the land of Tsangshu, which could have been conquered quickly, to fall into a protracted war. The second time was when he fought against the 23 prisoners in the demonic domain, where he was injured. The third time, which was now, was when he almost destroyed the evil spirit array, which was his opportunity to become a god. At that moment, Yuenshu's hatred for he had reached an extreme level, just like he's hatred for him. Die! As he waved his arms, 2 black pythons extended from his palms. They drew 2 black trails in the air, and bit towards who was falling freely. He was not afraid at all when he saw Yuenshu's attack. Instead, he was very calm. After all, he had completed his mission. 3 hours it didn't matter anymore. Thus, he turned on his taunting mode again. Yuenshu, you unfilial son. Look at your father flying so far away, and you didn't even go to welcome him. Instead, you came to welcome me. I am your, die. Before he could finish his sentence, a giant black python swallowed him whole. Another giant black python swallowed the previous python in one gulp. A violent force burst forth from within the giant black python's body. He did not last more than 2 seconds before he was shredded into a black fog and dissipated. Seeing that his body and soul had mysteriously disappeared again, Yuenshu's face darkened. From Yuenshu's point of view, he didn't die the previous few times, so he wouldn't die this time either. At that moment, Yuenshu suddenly regretted killing he. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't have a way to deal with this kind of guy who could resurrect. For example, the infinite darkness, which was a sealed cage that prevented one from committing suicide, could trap he in it and make him suffer a fate worse than death. At the thought of this, Yuenshu made up his mind. After this battle, he would build an exclusive enchantment similar to the infinite darkness for he. He would guard it personally. He didn't believe that he could continue to be so arrogant. Looking at the evil king who was still bound by the black dragon in the air, Yuenshu descended and dashed towards the area where the formation eye crystal of the evil spirit array had fallen. After landing, Yuenshu picked up the formation eye crystal that had already turned white. With a solemn expression, he began to observe whether the crystal was broken. He had studied the evil spirit array before and knew that the core of the evil spirit array was this crystal. The patterns of the array were also extended from this crystal. Therefore, as long as the crystal was not broken, it wouldn't be a problem to restore the evil spirit array. It was just that he would have to pay a huge price. After careful observation, Yuenshu finally let out a sigh of relief. He had to admit that the evil spirit array of the ancient gods was indeed powerful. The core of the array that was made could actually remain intact under the ravaging power of the rule. The only regret was that the energy inside had been exhausted. After knowing that there was hope for the array to be restored, Yuanshu's heart skipped a beat. He then turned his attention to the remains of the powerhouses that had been scattered in various areas of the mysterious dragon tomb. Since the array could be restored, he could naturally continue refining after the array was restored. At the same time that Yuanshu thought of this, who had already logged out of the game, had a flash of inspiration. He quickly logged into the forum and began to contact Niefeng, sending him messages like crazy. After Niefeng received the messages and understood what he was trying to convey, he immediately shouted in the regional channel, "Everyone, stop fighting. Go and grab the corpses. We're only halfway there now, we're only left with the corpses of the powerhouses." "Oh right, the great demon king said that we should prioritize the corpse of Mo Su. He wants to refine it and bring it to Yuanshu, this unfilial son. I'll buy it at a high price." As soon as Niefeng shouted, the noisy regional channel instantly fell silent. Subsequently, the European server players decisively gave up on the battle with Yuanshu's army and began to run towards the area where the corpses of the powerhouses had fallen. After knowing that the crisis had not been resolved, the players felt a sense of urgency in their hearts. The scene instantly became extremely chaotic. "Hurry up and grab the corpses. Sell them to the great demon king at a high price. I heard that the corpses of the powerhouses can be used to forge equipment. That's good stuff, hurry up and grab them. We can't let Yuanshu get the corpses again. Otherwise we won't be so lucky next time. Captain, you can run faster with your mount. There's one at 12 o'clock, hurry up." The regional live chat channel, the army's live chat channel, the guild's live chat channel, and the party's live chat channel were all filled with the players' shouts. At this moment, the corpses of the powerhouses that had fallen to the ground had become a delicious steamed bun in the eyes of the players. They were also the key to their plan to completely destroy Yuanshu's zombie army. At this moment, the players each chose a direction and began to rush towards the corpses of the powerhouses. Seeing this scene, Yuanshu was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately realized what the players were going to do. He quickly roared towards the people below him. "Stop them from snatching the corpses of the powerhouses and bring them back." Yuanshu's roar echoed between heaven and earth, shocking the soldiers of Yuanshu's army who were chasing after the players. Unlike the soldiers, the Ghost Kings under Yuanshu naturally knew how important the corpses of the powerhouses were. They immediately dispersed and swept through the air towards the corpses of the powerhouses. As the entire battlefield was very wide, the advantages of the players were immediately revealed at this moment. Firstly, it was convenient to communicate through the live chat channel. Secondly, the storage space could store the corpses. In comparison, the soldiers of Yuanshu's army had a harder time in this aspect. As long as a soldier managed to snatch the corpses of the powerhouses, they would become the focus of the players' attacks. One by one, they would pounce on the soldier with a ferocious expression and attack as a group, snatching the corpses from the soldier's hands and throwing them into the storage space. Naturally, it was impossible for the soldiers of Yuanshu's army to snatch the corpses of the powerhouses from the players' hands. At this moment, the storage space had become a cheat in snatching the corpses. However, when faced with the arrival of the Ghost Kings, the players still could not resist and a few of the corpses were snatched away by the Ghost Kings. At this moment, someone's exclamation was heard in the regional channel. "Wahahaha, I've snatched Yuanshu's corpse, the one that the great demon king wanted. I'm going to be rich. Brother, everyone who saw it has a share. Quick, send a red packet of soul coins to the guild." 666. The great demon king's goal of using it to beat up the unfilial son is about to be realized. F***ck, what's with your hand speed? I also snatched the corpse of a powerhouse just now, but a few pairs of hands suddenly appeared beside me. I didn't even have time to put it into the storage space before it disappeared. Which bastard took it away? Give it back to me, I'll XXXX you. It's a large-scale corpse snatching scene. If these powerhouses knew that they would be played like this after they died, they might as well burn themselves into ashes. He he he. Stop arguing, their ghost kings have already made their move. Quick, snatch a few more corpses. It's more than enough to exchange a corpse for a sea view house. Damn it, it's a windfall, hurry up and snatch it. Why are you crowding? Don't block the way. I've just changed my class to an undead knight recently, and I'm thinking of trying to refine corpses into an undead mount. Please don't block the way. The live chat channel was in chaos. At this moment, the players were no longer in the mood to fight with Yuanshu's soldiers. All of their eyes were bloodshot as they ran toward the corpses scattered around the battlefield. In the end, there were a total of 38 corpses, 23 of which were in the hands of the players. Yuanshu and his subordinates only managed to snatch 15 corpses, and these 15 corpses were obtained by Yuanshu and the Ghost Kings. Even if their subordinates managed to snatch the corpses, they would not be able to keep them. Although they did not manage to obtain all the corpses this time, the players knew that they did not suffer a loss. At this moment, the battle had officially come to an end, and the players had entered the final stage of being tortured and killed. However, since the mission had been completed, death was nothing to the players. They were all smiling as they welcomed the arrival of death. Chapter 378. Japan, Hokkaido. A light drizzle was falling from the gloomy sky. At this moment, in a prison in a small town in the northeast of the island, a man slowly walked out of the darkness. As the prison guards congratulated him, the prison's iron bars were opened, and he was escorted out of the prison. The moment he walked out of the prison, the man hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still walked out. No one came to greet him, and no one came to congratulate him. Only the cold raindrops fell on his body. I'm out of prison? He could not help but look at his empty right arm and laugh at himself. He slowly raised his head to look at the sky. The fine raindrops fell on his face, and he could not help but close his eyes. At this moment, his memory returned to 10 years ago. His name was Northstar Oneblade, and he was a direct descendant of the Japanese ancient sword school, the one-sword style. He had been extremely talented in swordsmanship since he was young, and it could be said that no one in the kendo dojo opened by his father could compare to him. Even his fellow disciples in the kendo dojo felt inferior in front of his talent in swordsmanship. It could be said that they were not on the same level at all. Back then, there were many sword schools in Japan, but most of them were modern swordsmanship, and they did not have much lethality in actual combat. Many of these swordsmanship were just for show, and they were just flashy moves to earn attention. However, there was no lack of truly powerful ancient sword schools, such as the Shinto style, the Nitin style, the Shadow style, the Ayashiki style, and so on. The successors of the orthodox ancient sword techniques were basically disdainful of the modern, flamboyant sword technique. However, they had contacts with other ancient sword techniques of the same level. Every year, they would hold 2 sword techniques exchanges and competitions. These competitions were divided into junior and adult years. Northstar Oneblade was extremely talented back then, and when he first stepped into the junior division competition, he defeated all his peers, and even those who were older than him. He crushed all of them and won the junior division championship. This extremely outstanding talent made his father, Northstar Hideo, extremely proud. He felt that Northstar Oneblade had the ability to revitalize the one-sword style and carry forward the ancestral swordsmanship. At that time, Northstar Oneblade also felt the same way. He felt that he had the ability to win first place in the junior division, which meant that he would also have the ability to win first place in the adult division in the future and push the one-sword style to the top of the ancient sword school, becoming the pinnacle that all sword practitioners looked up to. Unbeknownst to Northstar Oneblade, however, was that it was precisely his excellence that put pressure on his father, Northstar Hideo. This pressure didn't come from Northstar Blade, but from the outside world. The ancient swordsmanship competition was held twice a year, and Northstar One Blade easily took first place in the junior division. However, there was never any suspense about the last place in the official division, and that was his father, Northstar Hideo. At first, Bachin Hideo felt proud of Northstar One Blade. He felt that Northstar One Blade could reach heights that he had never reached before. But gradually, the noises from the outside world increased. At that time, Northstar Shiofu gradually felt the pressure. This was because his peers would always compare him to his son, Northstar One Blade. He had even overheard people talking about him. If Northstar One Blade had been born in another sect, that would have been perfect. Being born in the Northstar clan was a waste of talent. For a successor of traditional swordsmanship like him, this kind of humiliation was unbearable. After that, he would often recall the words of his peers, and he felt more and more that he was a coward, a weakling. This thought lingered in Northstar Hideo's mind, and he couldn't get rid of it. It was as if it had become a demon in his heart, tormenting him. It was at that moment that Northstar One Blade made a choice. He decided to practice the ancient swordsmanship technique passed down by his ancestors, One Blade School, Taiyuan. Back then, the ancient swordsmanship sects had explicitly forbidden the practice of the sword will form sword technique. In fact, it wasn't forbidden, but rather feared. This was because this swordsmanship was too damaging to the body. They didn't know how their ancestors had created this swordsmanship, or how they could withstand the injuries and disabilities that came with practicing it. However, they definitely didn't have the ability to practice it. This was a lesson that countless people had taught them with blood. The swordsmen who practiced the sword will form sword technique were basically physically disabled, and some even had mental problems. In short, without exception, none of them had a good ending. After many attempts by their predecessors, the descendants of the ancient swordsmanship sects no longer dared to touch the ancient sword will form sword technique. They sealed it away and only chose to practice the simplest sword techniques and sword technique. These most basic things were passed down as a tradition. Northstar Hideo was naturally aware of all this, but he had already made up his mind. He wanted to prove himself, and he wanted his son to see that his father wasn't a coward or a failure, and that he could become the true number one. Northstar Hideo naturally didn't know what his father had done. All he could sense was that his father had suddenly become more cheerful. He was no longer as gloomy and sullen as he had been in the past. This was a good thing for Northstar Hideo. However, the bad news came quickly. One day, when Northstar Hideo returned from school, he saw a house full of blood the moment he entered the door. Northstar Hideo's head was ringing, and he rushed into the house. Then, he saw his mother holding his father, who was covered in blood, in a daze. Her face was filled with despair. Then, as Northstar Hideo looked on in disbelief, she grabbed Northstar Hideo's beloved sword, Heartless Pill, and slashed it across her neck. Northstar Hideo was only 14 years old at the time. When he saw this scene, he knelt on the ground, looking helpless and desperate. He hoped that everything before his eyes was a dream. He didn't even know what had happened. His family had been eating peacefully in the morning, so how did things turn out like this when he came back at night? Northstar Hideo's heart was in a mess. He suddenly remembered something his father had said that morning. "Today, I'm going to compete with IKA again. This time, I'll definitely beat him." Northstar Hideo had said, "Good luck," and gone to school. However, he remembered his father's words clearly. This made Northstar Hideo subconsciously think that his opponent, Ika Tezuka, had killed his father during the competition. And because of his father's death, his mother, who loved his father dearly, couldn't bear the pain of parting and chose to follow him. Although it wasn't common for people to die from accidental injuries during a competition in the ancient swordsmanship circle, it did happen occasionally. This was because ancient swordsmanship was a real swordsmanship, not a fancy move. Therefore, there was an unwritten rule in the ancient swordsmanship circle. It was also what his father often told Northstar Hideo. If an accidental injury occurred during a competition, the opponent wouldn't be held responsible, and the family wouldn't be allowed to claim compensation. Otherwise, it would be seen as a permanent withdrawal from the ancient swordsmanship circle, and it would also be a disgrace to the ancestors. Since one had joined the circle, he naturally had to abide by the rules. This rule didn't protect anyone, but the fundamental reason for the existence of ancient swordsmanship. It was swordsmanship that involved actual combat. If this rule disappeared, ancient swordsmanship would be no different from modern swordsmanship. It would just be a series of moves. Therefore, this rule had always been imprinted in the heart of every ancient swordsmanship practitioner. This naturally included Northstar Hideo, who had learned swordsmanship from his father since he was a child. Therefore, Northstar Hideo obeyed his father's teachings. He didn't choose to call the police. Instead, he cried bitterly as he buried his father and mother's bodies in his courtyard. Then, he took his father's heartless pill and went to find Ika Tezuka for revenge. Although Northstar Hideo's father had trained his willpower since he was a child, he was only 14 years old when he faced his father's death and his mother's suicide in front of him. The coldness and despair he felt were deep in his bones. However, he still mustered his courage because his father had said that he was the successor of Northstar Itoryu. He had to face everything with courage. Although he knew that he might not be Ika Tezuka's opponent, he wanted to take revenge. Then, he would use swordsmanship to fight fair and square to avenge his father. Chapter 379. Use swordsmanship to avenge my father. This was the first thought that appeared in the mind of the 14-year-old Northstar One Blade when he saw his parents die. Under his father's teachings, he knew that the opponent was not responsible for the death of a duel. He did not want to bring shame to the Northstar family's One Blade style, so he chose not to call the police. Since his father had died in a duel, he would inherit his swordsmanship and use it to avenge his parents. And that was exactly what he did. Holding the heartless pill that his father had left him, he walked towards the dojo of the Aido school. When he stepped into the kendo pavilion, it immediately attracted the curiosity of many apprentices in the kendo pavilion. Northstar One Blade's gaze was cold, and his clothes were stained with blood. Although he was thin, he stood there like a god of death. The inheritor of the Northstar family's One Blade style, Northstar One Blade, is here to challenge the dojo master of the Aido school, Ayazuka. Northstar Idao looked coldly at the astonished sword pavilion apprentices as he said this. Northstar One Blade? Hearing this name, the students were all very surprised. This was because this name was too famous in the ancient swordsmanship world. It could be said that he was a genius in swordsmanship, and he had the potential to become the #1 swordsman in the official group in the future. A middle-aged man in a white dojo uniform could not help but frown and say, Northstar One Blade, don't mess around. You're not old enough to join the official group. The dojo master is not someone you can challenge. I want to challenge Ayazuka. If you don't agree, then I'll admit that the Aido school has surrendered to the One Blade style. From now on, my status in the swordsmanship world will be lower than the One Blade style. Hearing this, the middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed. In his eyes, these words were undoubtedly a provocation. After all, the Northstar One Blade style was the weakest of all ancient sword styles. Every year, in the official ranking competition, Northstar Hideo would always be at the bottom. So, in the eyes of the middle-aged man, asking the Aido style to surrender to the One Blade style was an insult to their dignity. Northstar One Blade, are you sure? The middle-aged man's expression became serious. Although Northstar One Blade was only a child, these words were already a challenge to the Aido school. I'm sure, let Ike Tezuka fight with me. The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with anger, but he still nodded and turned to leave. North Star Blade stood quietly in place, ignoring the curious gazes around him as he waited for Ikatazuka to arrive. His words were too decisive, and he brought up the competition of swordsmanship schools. Even if he was a child, Ikatazuka still came. In the face of his father's murderer, North Star Blade didn't say much. He didn't cry or yell like a child. He was so calm that it didn't match his age at all. Under the guidance of the middle-aged sword master, North Star One Blade and Ikatazuka arrived at a courtyard behind the dojo. Ikatazuka was a 47-year-old middle-aged man. He wore loose white swordsmanship clothes and had the famous sword Iajutsu on his waist. He wore wooden clogs on his feet and had a steady aura around him. Compared to North Star One Blade, he was a bit slender. They didn't seem to be on the same level at all. North Star Lord, are you challenging me on behalf of your father? This makes me very disappointed. Looking at North Star One Blade, Juha Tezuka said regretfully. At this time, Ikatazuka was also very surprised by North Star Blade's arrival. Because it was his father, North Star Hideo, who had an appointment with him, but it was North Star Blade who came at this moment. This made him feel that North Star Hideo had avoided the appointment with him, which was really a coward's move. The disappointment he was talking about was North Star Hideo. To North Star Blade, however, these words carried a different meaning. North Star Blade's face was cold, and he didn't answer anymore. Instead, he pulled out the heartless pill and put on a posture of drawing a sword. Seeing this, Ikatazuka also pulled out the Iajutsu in his hand, raised the sword horizontally, and put on a posture of a swordsmanship attack. North Star Lord, I won't hold back in this competition. Think about it carefully. North Star Blade still didn't answer. The anger didn't go to his head. At this time, his mind was abnormally clear. The heartless pill was slowly pulled out of the scabbard. At the same time the sword was pulled out halfway, his figure rushed forward, pulled out the heartless pill, and stabbed towards Ikatazuka's throat. Ha! Ikatazuka immediately raised his long sword and slashed down. At this time, North Star Blade's figure was low, and he slid to the left. However, Ikatazuka's attack also changed direction in the downward slash. Obviously, he had already seen through North Star Blade's attack. He only used 30% of his strength, and then quickly changed his attack. Fortunately, North Star Blade reacted in time and raised his sword to meet the attack. Otherwise, this move would have cut off his head. However, in terms of strength, North Star Blade was obviously no match for Ikatazuka. With the sound of metal colliding, North Star Blade was smashed to the ground. North Star Lord, you lost. After Ikatazuka finished speaking, he pulled back his sword and stood in front of North Star Blade. Again, North Star Blade climbed up from the ground with a cold expression. After taking a few steps back, he stood in front of Ikatazuka again and put on a posture of drawing his sword. Seeing this, Ikatazuka frowned, but he still pulled out the katana. This time, it was still North Star Blade who launched the attack first, and this sword was still aimed at the throat. Although North Star Blade was extremely talented in swordsmanship, after all, his cultivation time was too short, and he couldn't compare with Ikatazuka, who had immersed in swordsmanship for many years. He immediately saw North Star Blade's flaw, and he slashed down the katana in his hand, slashing toward North Star Blade's head. However, to his surprise, North Star Blade did not retract his sword this time, and the sword still stabbed straight at his neck. This sword, North Star Blade had the determination to die, to use his own life for revenge. Blood splattered everywhere. Polaris One's sword pierced Ikuchi Tezuka's neck as he wished, but Ikuchi Tezuka's sword stopped at the last moment. Cough! The katana in Ikatazuka's hand fell, and he covered his neck and breathed with difficulty. At this moment, North Star Blade was stunned. He didn't know why Ikatazuka stopped at the last moment. Why? North Star Blade looked at Ikatazuka, who was kneeling on the ground, and shouted angrily. However, at this time, Ike Tezuka was no longer able to answer his question. He knelt on the ground with an extremely painful expression. The onlookers of the kendo gym quickly began to call the emergency number, went forward to help Ike Tezuka up, and began to carry him out. At that moment, North Star Blade did not have a trace of the pleasure of revenge. Ike Tezuka could have killed him, but he retracted his katana, which was an insult to North Star Blade. If you could, why didn't you retract your katana to my father? With a complicated mood, North Star Blade walked out step by step under the angry eyes of all the Ike Kendo Gym's disciples. When he returned to the door again, he saw a number of police cars, and it was surrounded by neighbors. Seeing this scene, North Star Blade was neither happy nor sad, and just walked straight in. However, as soon as he entered the yard, he was stopped by the police. Outsiders are not allowed to enter the scene of a serious crime. I am North Star Blade, the son of the deceased. As soon as his voice fell, all the policemen around turned their eyes to him. After this, he was taken back to the police station for investigation. In the face of the police's inquiry, North Star Blade told the truth. He told the police that his father died in a swordsmanship competition, and his mother couldn't bear the pain and followed him. However, he made it clear that he would not pursue responsibility. The non-prosecution treaty of the ancient swordsmanship competition was protected by the law at that time because it was a historical legacy. Just like the deaths in boxing matches hundreds of years ago, they were all unintentional casualties in competitive contests, and they would be exempted from responsibility. In other words, as long as North Star Blade agreed not to pursue responsibility, then this matter would be finalized. However, the police naturally wouldn't be so perfunctory. They recorded everything North Star Blade said word for word, and began to investigate the matter. 3 days later, North Star Blade saw a piece of news. Ike Tezuka, the Ike School swordsmanship master, died. On the same day, he was taken back to the police station again. This time, the police told him 2 pieces of news. First, Ike Tezuka's family gave up on pursuing responsibility for killing Ike Tezuka. Hearing this news, North Star Blade was neither happy nor sad. He had already guessed this result. However, the second news was like a thunderbolt, exploding North Star Blade's head. According to the police's description, through the nearby surveillance investigation, his father didn't go to the swordsmanship competition with Ike Tezuka that day, nor did he leave the house. According to the investigation at the scene, the final conclusion was, North Star Blade's father was killed by his mother. As for the reason, the investigation had not yet come to a conclusion. The police asked him if he could provide any clues, or if he found any abnormal reactions from his parents, or if the family relationship was not harmonious, etc. However, at that time, North Star Blade didn't listen to what the police said. He didn't believe that his mother would kill his father. She loved his father so much. Every time she looked at his father, her eyes were so gentle and affectionate. What reason did she have to kill her lover? North Star Blade couldn't accept the police's words, and he didn't want to listen to what they said anymore. He immediately ignored the police's inquiry and ran home alone. At this time, North Star Blade felt that what the police said was a lie. Everything was fake. In his opinion, anyone could kill his father, but his mother wouldn't. Returning home, he rushed to his mother's room and began to rummage through all possible clues. He urgently needed a reason to prove that his parents loved each other. The wedding ring, the flower paper umbrella given on Valentine's Day, the photo in front of the cherry tree, just as North Star Blade thought. His mother treasured countless memories with his father. All of these were proof that his mother loved his father deeply, and all of these were proof that his mother couldn't kill his father. At this time, a pink diary entered North Star Blade's vision. When he opened the diary, he found that it was full of his mother's thoughts. Most of the first half of the diary recorded the process of her meeting and falling in love with his father. In the latter half, in addition to his father, North Star Hideo, there was another person, and that was his birth and growth. The words in the diary were beautiful, revealing a strong sense of happiness. Northstar Blade couldn't help but tear up as he read. However, the next part of the diary stunned Northstar Blade. His eyes were filled with disbelief. In the end, there was only fear in his eyes. Everything his mother had recorded proved that the police were telling the truth. Monday, XX month, 2309. Sunny. Hideo drank a lot today and he seemed to be in a bad mood. I helped him into his room to rest, but he started crying. It was the first time I had seen him cry. I didn't know what had happened, so I asked him. Hideo told me that he had embarrassed One Blade. With such a weakling as his father, One Blade would probably feel terrible about it. I tried to comfort him, but Hideo was already drunk. He didn't listen to me and kept complaining about his powerlessness. At this moment, my heart ached, and I blamed myself for not being able to help Hideo when he was at his weakest. Wednesday, XX month, 2309. Light rain. Hideo's condition was getting worse, and I could feel that he was under a lot of pressure. However, besides the time he got drunk, he didn't tell me anything. I knew that he was afraid that I would worry about him, so he had to bear the pressure alone. However, I felt sorry for Hideo. That was why I decided to go to the shrine tomorrow to pray for Hideo. I hoped that he would be able to pull through. Go for it. Hideo, you're the best. Sunday, XX month, 2309. Sunny. Today was the day of the junior swordsmanship competition. One Blade was as outstanding as ever. He won first place in the junior swordsmanship competition again. One Blade looked exactly like Hideo when he was young. He was so handsome and I was so proud of him. Tuesday, XX month, 2309. Sunny. I could feel that Hideo's condition worsened after One Blade won first place again. Although he was proud of One Blade, he was also a swordsman. I guessed he felt that he had embarrassed One Blade again. How could I comfort him? I suddenly felt that One Blade shouldn't be so outstanding. He was so good in the past. He was so outstanding that he gave his father too much pressure. Tuesday, XX month, 2309. Heavy rain. Today, Hideo came to find me and confided in me. I was really happy. I was really happy that Hideo didn't hide it from me anymore and was willing to share his troubles with me. However, what he said to me scared me. He said that he wanted to practice the ancient sword will swordsmanship. He wanted One Blade to be proud of him. I didn't agree, but Hideo begged me to respect his decision. He couldn't stand being called a weakling anymore. Looking at Hideo's helplessness and hope, I couldn't help but cry. In the end, I agreed because I could see the desire in Hideo's eyes. Perhaps this was the only way to make him pull back. Thursday, XX month, 2309. Fog. Recently, the confident and cheerful Hideo had returned. He had really changed. His previous dejection had been swept away. Now he was so confident. He told me that he had become stronger and stronger. The ancient sword will's swordsmanship training was really effective. However, I was worried because I knew that the ancient sword will swordsmanship was a forbidden technique that his body couldn't bear. I was afraid that something would happen to Hideo. What should I do? What should I do? But I didn't stop Hideo from practicing. It was Hideo's hope, and I didn't have the heart to break it. I didn't want to see him depressed like before. Friday, XX month, 2309. Clear. Hideo told me that he had sent a challenge to Ikegami Tezuka. He was confident that he could win this swordsmanship competition. I was happy for him. I asked God to bless me and let Hideo win this time. After this, I could persuade Hideo to give up on practicing the ancient sword will swordsmanship. Wednesday, XX month, 2309. Clear. Before the competition, Hideo's body suddenly became terrible. We went to the hospital and found that his internal organs were slightly damaged. I was really scared. What had to come had to come. I hoped that he could give up on the challenge against Ikegami Tezuka and recover first. However, Hideo refused. I'm sure I can win this battle. I can't give up. Otherwise, I'll be called a coward. Saturday, XX month, 2309. Clear. On the second day before the duel, Hideo's body condition became worse and worse. Moreover, he seemed to have some mental problems. From time to time, he would hallucinate. However, he endured the pain in front of Ikegami Tezuka. He asked me not to tell Ikegami Tezuka about this. He was a good father, but he shouldn't bear this kind of pain. What should I do? I suddenly felt that I was so weak. I couldn't provide any help to Hideo. I blamed myself so much. Sunday, XX year, 2039. Tomorrow was the day of the duel between Hideo and Ikegami Tezuka. However, Hideo's current condition wasn't good. He was trembling when he walked. How could he hold his sword and fight? I shouldn't go to the duel this time. Otherwise, something bad would happen to Hideo. I tried to persuade Hideo, but he refused again. He told me that he wanted to break the taboo of the ancient sword spirit and break the shackles of his body. He told me that if he succeeded, the sword energy in his body would condense into a sword orb. It wouldn't run around in his body anymore. In other words, he would become a normal person again. However, if he failed, he would be possessed by a demon and lose his mind. I was scared. I asked him what he should do if he failed. He knelt down and begged me. He asked me to kill him if it really happened because he didn't want to tarnish the name of the Ikegami Tezuka anymore. Monday, XX year, 2039. Clear. Today was the day of Hideo's duel. It was also the day that Hideo would try to break the taboo of the ancient sword spirit. I was so scared. I was so scared. North Star Blade's heart trembled as he read his mother's diary. From the initial happiness and warmth to the final sadness, his mother's change of heart had come from his father. But in the end, it was because of him. He had always thought that he was outstanding. His mother and father were proud of him. However, he had never known that he had brought such heavy pressure to his father. By now, North Star Blade understood that the police hadn't lied to him. It was his mother who had killed his father. Although his mother still loved his father deeply, it was precisely because of this deep love that she made such a heartbreaking choice to end his father's suffering. In the end, his mother couldn't bear the pain in her heart and chose to follow her father. So, Ikegami Tezuka wasn't the one at fault. It was him. His excellence had caused his father's death. The truth was so bloody that North Star Blade couldn't help but cry. He was unable to accept this reality. Right now, he hated himself for being so outstanding. If he hadn't brought pressure to his father, none of this would have happened. His helplessness was the truest reflection of his current situation. It was as if the world had turned gray. He lay on the ground and cried bitterly as he hugged his mother's diary. Right now, he was truly like a child. Chapter 380. Now that North Star Blade knew the truth, the days that followed were dark and gloomy. Swordsmanship, studies, and life. North Star Blade couldn't find the slightest interest in any of this. He just lived his life in a daze. Remorse and self-blame filled every corner of his life. Just like that, 2 years passed. The ancient swordsmanship circle had basically forgotten about this swordsmanship genius who streaked across the sky like a shooting star. He had already become a thing of the past. During these 2 years, North Star Blade also fell in love with drinking and smoking. He did everything he could to numb himself. His family's kendo gym also quickly closed down due to lack of care. He left his home, which had left him in despair, and began to wander like a vagabond. No one dared to believe that this unshaven, unkempt man was a youth who wasn't even 17 years old. The sky was his blanket and the earth was his bed. In the days to come, he was driven away by others and despised by others. He lived like a piece of trash that had been thrown to the side of the road. He had no value or sympathy. Even North Star Blade himself felt that he had brought all of this upon himself. Thus, he had no complaints about living like this. After learning the truth, all he felt was self-blame. On this day, North Star Blade continued to wander aimlessly, his eyes hazy with drunkenness. Even he didn't know why he had come to the seaside. The sea breeze blew gently, and the sound of the waves came one after another. The crimson sunset dyed half the sky red. Seeing this scene, Northstar Blade couldn't help but be stunned. He was very familiar with this scene. He had seen this scene in his memory. It was a seaside dinner organized by his mother when his father and mother were still alive. At that time, Northstar Blade was only 9 years old. It was also when he had just come into contact with swordsmanship. He could still clearly remember his father practicing swordsmanship for him at the seaside. It was also from that moment that he fell in love with swordsmanship. His mother pointed at the sea, rubbed his head gently and told him, "Don't worry, Blade, your heart must be as broad as the sea. Become a man because you will inherit the Northstar family's legacy. Don't embarrass your ancestors." Northstar Blade could still clearly remember how he had nodded vigorously with a red face. At that moment, Northstar Blade's eyes reddened. He missed his father and mother. He missed them so much. As he poured the sake into his mouth and listened to the sound of the waves crashing on the beach, his eyes became hazy from the intoxication. The sound in his ears became more and more unclear, and his vision became more and more blurry. In the dream, he once again relived the moment when his family reunited at the seaside. A rare smile appeared on his tightly shut face. After an unknown period of time, Northstar Blade felt an itch on the tip of his nose and woke up from his slumber. Opening his eyes, he saw a woman with a sweet smile naughtily poking at his nose, touching it again and again. As soon as Northstar Edao opened his eyes, the woman stuck her tongue out at him and took a few steps back. Northstar Blade finally got a good look at the newcomer's face. To his surprise, the woman turned out to be a witch of the shrine. She wore a white robe, a scarlet skirt, a white pouch, and a pair of red-buttoned straw sandals. Her hair was tied up with white sandalwood paper, and she also wore the standard chiseo, outer garment of a witch. Although it was the modern era, the status of a witch was still very noble in Japan because the Japanese witches existed for the gods. Unlike them, the witches of Chi Dragon existed for the people. At the peak of their power, the witches of the shrine were regarded as the representatives of the gods in the human world. They were even called the children of gods, and they were the supreme beings respected by all. Even in the modern era, although the status of a witch was not as glorious as it once was, it was still a symbol, an alternative, noble, in an equal society. "Why are you sleeping here?" the witch asked curiously. Northstar Blade didn't answer. Instead, he slowly stood up, picked up the bottle of sake, and staggered toward the town under the witch's astonished gaze. The witch was very surprised to see Northstar Blade's attitude. Usually, people around her treated her with great respect, and this was the first time she had met someone who directly ignored her. She couldn't help but pout. She jogged to catch up with Northstar Blade and blocked his way. "I'm talking to you!" "What's the matter?" Northstar Blade looked at her indifferently and asked. "Well, I might be lost. Can you take me back to the shrine?" The girl seemed to be very embarrassed, and as she spoke, her face became red. "Yes, I didn't sneak out," the girl added in the end, as if she was trying to defend herself. "Not interested." Northstar Blade took a step to the right and continued to walk forward. At the same time, he picked up the bottle of sake and drank a mouthful. Then he shook the empty bottle with a regretful look on his face and reached out to throw it on the beach. But before Northstar Blade could take a few steps, the girl stopped in front of him again with the bottle of sake in her arms. She said angrily, "You littered, this is yours. Please take care of the environment." After saying that, the girl stuffed the bottle into Northstar Blade's hand and said again, "Maybe the way I said it was wrong. Then let's do it again. Hello, my name is Kikyo, a witch of the Yin-Yang Shrine. Now, please take me back to the shrine." Kikyo bowed slightly. Northstar Blade was speechless at this moment. He felt that this witch was so clingy. Looking at Kikyo, who was still bowing and waiting for a reply, North Star Blade stretched out his hand and pointed to the right. Go that way and you'll meet people. Let them take you back. I think they'll be very happy. Hearing this, the smile on Kikyo's face suddenly stiffened, and then he looked up angrily. I want you to take me back. I'm not free. I'm going to buy some sake. After saying that, North Star Blade took a step to the right and walked forward. However, he had only taken a few steps when Little Witch stopped him again. How can you not respect me at all? North Star Blade ignored her and continued to walk forward, not even bothering to talk nonsense with her. After blocking him a few times, Little Witch was truly enraged. She did not try to stop him anymore, instead following behind North Star Idao, waving her little fists at him with an angry look on her face. After following them all the way into the town, there were more people around. North Star Blade looked back and saw that Little Witch was still following him. She did not ask for help from the people around. But now that there were people around, the anger on Little Witch's face dissipated. She was full of sweet smiles, and from time to time, she would greet passers-by by nodding at them. Although North Star Blade did not know why Little Witch did not ask for help from passers-by, he could not be bothered. He continued walking forward until he reached the town's supermarket and walked in. After choosing a cigarette, North Star Blade went to the checkout counter, but when he took out his wallet, he found that he did not have enough money to pay the bill. Just as he was about to put the cigarette back, Little Witch, who had been following him all this time, suddenly jumped out, holding a note in her right hand, and waved it at North Star Blade proudly. North Star Blade was stunned for a long time by this childish display. He felt that this witch was really boring. But at that moment, Little Witch suddenly came to his side, holding the note in both hands and handing it to the cashier. Big sister, this is to make up for the difference. The cashier was stunned by Kikyo's sweet smile, and she could not help but smile back. After paying for the change and walking out of the supermarket, Kikyo seemed to be very happy. He quickly ran to North Star Blade's side and smiled. Now that we know each other, can you take me back to the shrine? There are so many people here. Why just me? North Star Blade asked, puzzled. Because you look so beautiful when you're asleep, mother. Lord Oracle said that people with beautiful smiles are definitely not bad people. Hearing this, North Star Blade stopped in his tracks and turned to look at Kikyo. However, he saw the sincerity in Kikyo's eyes, without a trace of falsehood. At that moment, North Star Blade felt his heart wrench. All this time, he had been despised by everyone, but he did not expect that the noble witch would treat him as a good person. You're wrong. I'm a bad person. After opening the cigarette and lighting it, North Star Blade turned around and continued walking aimlessly. Along the way, the two of them began to chat idly with each other. Although he felt a little helpless, he had to admit that Kikyo was really warm. This was the first time in years that North Star Blade had spoken so much. In the end, facing Kikyo's persistent pestering, North Star Blade chose to compromise, bringing Little Witch to her yin-yang shrine on the tram. The moment before leaving, Kikyo once again bowed respectfully to North Star Blade, then a victorious smile appeared on his face. At that moment, for some reason, North Star Blade suddenly felt that the smile was really beautiful. His heart, which had been sealed in ice for a long time, cracked open. It had nothing to do with love or friendship, just pure warmth. After that, North Star Blade once again returned to his wandering life, but he would often return to the seaside, enjoying the sea breeze, listening to the cries of the seagulls, and reminiscing about the past. Because there was a beautiful past there, but at home, all he could think of was the bloody scene, and he would even wake up from his dreams. It was a sad place, a memory that he did not want to recall. This kind of life passed for a long time. Once again, North Star Blade awoke from his dream at the seaside, and once again saw the little witch, Kikyo. North Star One Blade no longer resisted when he saw her again. He just asked, "Did you sneak out again?" "No, I got lost this time." Little Witch Kikyo blushed and tried to explain. After that, North Star Blade would occasionally see Little Witch Kikyo on the seaside, who had lost her way. The flame of friendship was ignited in their hearts, and as they got to know each other, they became very good friends, pure friendship. To Kikyo, everyone around her was incomparably respectful to her, so she had to wear her own noble mask to face everyone. But with North Star Blade, she did not need to. She could be angry, she could be willful, she could be unscrupulous, and she could even laugh without any attitude. This kind of ease was something she had never experienced before. And North Star Blade also felt the warmth that he had not felt since his family left, and he enjoyed this feeling very much. And his originally frozen heart gradually melted, little by little. He walked out of the darkness that surrounded him, and welcomed the beam of light that was Kikyo. This kind of life lasted for half a year, but after that, Kikyo never came to see him again. During that time, North Star Blade was very disappointed, but he knew his identity. He was just a wanderer, and compared to the noble witch, he was like an unremarkable weed on the roadside, not worthy of being a friend at all. But a month later, Kikyo appeared again, which was undoubtedly a pleasant surprise for North Star Blade. But this time, Kikyo looked completely different. She had changed into an incomparably gorgeous witch costume, and her hair was tied up, looking very beautiful, but the rims of her eyes were red. This time, Kikyo came to bid farewell to North Star Blade. Although North Star Blade was disappointed to say goodbye, he didn't want to force the issue. Their friendship was the kind that could break at any time. He was already prepared for it, but North Star Blade wanted to know what happened to Kikyo, and why she looked like she was crying. At this time, North Star Blade has long regarded Kikyo as his family, a good friend. He wanted to know the reason why Kikyo was so wronged. Under North Star Blade's questioning, the naive Kikyo told North Star Blade everything that had happened to it. Originally, Kikyo's identity was not only a witch, but also a priestess of the school of Inyang. Although her identity was incomparably noble, she was about to reach adulthood. After reaching adulthood, she would step down from her position as a witch and enter the school of Inyang's underground palace, forever guarding the school of Inyang's ancestral hall, unable to leave. Although North Star Blade heard that after reaching adulthood, this was the first time he heard about guarding the ancestral hall, he couldn't help but be stunned. In Kikyo's view, all of this was the school of Inyang's rules. She couldn't disobey. From the moment she became a witch, her fate was already determined. However, in North Star Blade's view, all of this was bullshit. What era was this, and such pedantic and old-fashioned thinking still existed? He told Kikyo to bravely pursue her own life, but Kikyo shook her head. North Star Blade asked her why, but Kikyo said that she had no choice. The world was not as simple as she thought. North Star Blade could feel Kikyo's helplessness at this moment. Since she didn't want to say, he didn't ask too much, but before she left, he asked, "You don't want to?" In response to this question, Kikyo nodded. The helplessness and disappointment in her eyes were clear, causing North Star Blade's heart to ache. However, he naturally wouldn't just watch Kikyo be imprisoned in the depths of the school of Inyang's underground palace. He personally went to the Inyang shrine and told the priest that Kikyo needed freedom. Regarding his ridiculous behavior, although the priest looked kind on the surface, he didn't take it seriously at all. Facing North Star Blade, who came several times, they finally used the method of expulsion. After all, in their view, North Star Blade was just a vagrant, a dispensable character. North Star Blade didn't give up even when communication was fruitless. He chose to call the police, and even wanted to use the power of public opinion to help Kikyo out of the underground palace. Just as Kikyo said, the world was not as simple as he thought. After calling the police replied that Kikyo was willing, and they had no right to interfere. However, North Star Blade clearly remembered that Kikyo told him that she was unwilling, so how could she be willing? His last hope was the media, but they didn't give him any reply. Although they promised to report this matter, the truth was that they didn't take North Star Blade seriously at all. When they came to find him again, not only did they refuse to mention what they had promised, they even showed him disgust and impatience. This was the reality that Kikyo was talking about. Even so, North Star Blade didn't give up. Since he couldn't rely on external forces, he could only rely on himself. He wanted to personally bring Kikyo out of the school of Inyang's underground palace. After that, North Star Blade, who had been wandering for a long time, returned home again and took out his father's heartless pill. Touching this famous sword again, he didn't feel unfamiliar at all, as if the weapon was an extension of his arm. The moment the blade was unsheathed, it was still cold and incomparably sharp. Chapter 381. One Man and One Sword. North Star Blade returned to the Inyang shrine. He looked completely different from before. His dirty clothes had been changed, and his unkempt hair had been cut short. His unkempt beard had disappeared, and his decadence had been swept away. Now, like the sword in his hand, it shone with a cold, sharp light. The people in the shrine were all too familiar with North Star Blade. Although he had changed his appearance, they still recognized him. They wanted to chase him away, but when they saw the sword in his hand, they were afraid. This time, they didn't dare to step forward. Even the god officials were cowering in a corner, shouting out warnings. However, North Star Blade ignored them. He entered the shrine step by step, heading for the Inyang school's underground palace. He'd thought everything would go smoothly, but when he reached the underground palace, North Star Blade ran into someone. It was an old woman in black priest robes. When North Star Blade arrived, she only said calmly, "Go back. The Kikyo won't leave." North Star Blade didn't say anything. He unsheathed the heartless pill and pointed it at the priest. This time, however, the priest didn't dodge in fear like the priest. Instead, North Star Blade saw something he couldn't believe. This was an ability that surpassed North Star Blade's understanding. Inyang technique. A ferocious-looking, armored spirit-branded retainer appeared in her mind. This strange scene shocked North Star Blade to the limit. After that, the priestess didn't attack. She simply asked North Star Blade if he still wanted to fight. Although he was shocked, North Star Blade didn't retreat. Little Witch had pulled him out of the darkness. This time, it was his turn. However, the power of a Shikigami wasn't something North Star Blade could resist. No matter how talented he was in swordsmanship, even if he'd once been a genius, in the face of extraordinary power, he was nothing more than a mortal. Without any suspense, North Star Blade lost. He couldn't fight back at all. In the end, he was carried out, covered in wounds, and thrown outside the shrine like trash. After that, North Star Blade disappeared. He didn't return to the shrine for several weeks. However, just as everyone in the Inyang shrine thought he'd given up, he returned. However, North Star's blade was still met with an unparalleled power, and he was thrown out again. It was too much for a mortal to fight against the power of ghosts and deities. This was not a gap that could be bridged with absolute talent in swordsmanship. But even though he failed again and again, North Star One Blade did not give up. Because every time he wanted to give up, he would think of Kikyo, of her waiting for him in the dark underground palace. He could let himself down, but he would not let down Kikyo. After half a year of friendship, he had already regarded Kikyo as his family. Finally, before Kikyo left, he asked not only Kikyo, but also himself. This was his promise to Kikyo, and also to himself. Every few weeks, North Star Idao would come to fight the priestess. His swordsmanship was getting stronger by the day, and he was progressing at a godly pace. This kind of growth potential made the old shaman feel incredulous. From being crushed by the Shikigami in the beginning, to barely being able to resist, and now to the point where he could just about match it. Using the body of a mortal to fight against ghosts and deities, North Star Idao was astounded. What she did not know was that every time North Star Idao left, he would go back to practice his swordsmanship, looking for the seniors of the ancient sword world to learn sword techniques. His sincerity moved many people. Those seniors could not bear to let Northstar Idao's excellent swordsmanship go to waste, so they began to teach him swordsmanship and killing moves. Just like that, Northstar Idao grew stronger day by day, reaching a new level every day. This was his talent, a sword genius that only appeared once in 10,000 years. During this period of time, Northstar One Blade had single-handedly defeated many of the seniors of the ancient sword technique world. In the eyes of the descendants of the ancient sword technique schools, this returning prodigy was undoubtedly going to be the uncrowned king of the official swordsmanship competition in the future. He would reign supreme over the ancient sword technique world for decades to come, and no one would be able to defeat him. But Northstar Idao's heart was not here. He wielded his sword again only to give her freedom, and nothing else. So to the surprise of all the ancient sword seniors, Northstar Idao, who had reached 18 years old, gave up the right to represent Idao in the official group competition. But he did not give up the sword in his hand. This sword was the key to breaking Kikyo's world of darkness. Hard training, challenge. Hard training, challenge, defeat after defeat, more and more scars appeared on his body. Northstar Idao never gave up, and after each defeat, he became stronger and stronger, until one day, in another battle, his heartless pill pierced through the demon Shikigami, turning it into an exploding black mist. He succeeded. To the disbelief of the priestess, he had used the power of the mortal sword to pierce through the obstruction of divine power. At that moment, Northstar Idao felt truly satisfied, because he had once again wielded his sword for this moment. But what left Northstar Idao in disbelief was that at that moment, the priestess told him, "Kikyo died a long time ago." These words were like a bucket of cold, bone-chilling water, pouring over Northstar Idao's heart. The joy in his heart was instantly washed away. In disbelief, Northstar Idao ignored the priestess' obstruction and charged into the school of Yin Yang's underground palace, searching like crazy. In the end, he arrived at a room. The room was empty, but the walls were covered with many pieces of paper. The paper was filled with drawings of two people holding hands as they watched the sun rise and set by the sea. There were also many short stories about the two of them. "I really like being with him. It's very stable, very peaceful, very happy. I can't sneak out to see him anymore. I really miss him. What is he doing now? Could he be thinking of me? No, he should just forget about me. Actually, I'm starting to like him a little. Wow, I actually gave birth to a child for him in my dreams today. How embarrassing. Maybe I'm going to die soon. After all, I'm a sacrifice for the Shikigami. But he doesn't know any of this. That's good. After all, the time I was eaten should have been very ugly. Thankfully, he can't see it. Each drawing, each paragraph of text, all of this touched Northstar Idao's nerves. Sacrifice. At this moment, Northstar Idao finally understood why the priestess had said that Kikyo was dead. It was because she had been used as a sacrifice for the Shikigami. Heartache, endless rage surged in his chest. Northstar Idao's arrival had already alerted the Onmyoges cultivating in the underground palace. They quickly gathered around. The furious Northstar Idao only wanted to kill. But he was only one person. Although he was strong and his swordsmanship was superb, he was still no match for the Shikigami summoned by so many Onmyoges. No matter how many times he swung his sword, he was still no match for them. This was yet another power that he couldn't match. He was seriously injured once again. Northstar Idao should have been killed. But the priestess suddenly arrived and saved him. She told Northstar Idao not to come here again, or else he wouldn't be able to leave alive the next time. The heavily injured Northstar Idao was on the verge of death. He asked the priestess why she saved him. But the priestess said, "Kikyo is her daughter." At that moment, Northstar Idao angrily asked the priestess why she could bear to watch Kikyo be sacrificed to the Shikigami. "This is all fate. I am powerless to resist, she is powerless to resist, and you are even more powerless. A sad expression appeared on the priestess' face after she finished speaking. Before she left, she told Northstar Idao that he should never think about revenge. The Onmyoges were far more powerful than they were. They were as powerful as gods, and no matter how strong his swordsmanship was, could he fight against a god? With that, the priestess left, leaving behind the dying Northstar Idao. Despair was like a demon that had been watching Northstar Idao all this time, whispering into his ear, "I will always be by your side." Northstar Idao was rescued by a passerby and sent to the hospital. But after he was discharged from the hospital, Northstar Idao's original sharpness disappeared once more. The priestess' warning before she left continued to echo in his ears. How could a mortal fight against a god? Even though the priestess was so powerful, there were even more powerful Onmyoges in the underground palace. There were even those who were as powerful as the priestess had said. He had no idea what he should do next. No matter how hard he trained his swordsmanship, he would never be able to fight against the Onmyoges, much less avenge Kikyo. When he returned home, Northstar Idao sank into the pain of the past. What's the point of learning this sword? It's because of this sword that my father left and my mother followed. Now I see it as my only hope, but it can't give me the power to take revenge. Then what's the point of learning it? What Northstar Idao felt was not helplessness, but pain. He went to his father's room and knelt in front of his father's memorial tablet. He raised the heartless pill with both hands and placed it in front of his father's memorial tablet, intending to abandon the sword. But at that moment, he noticed a book on the table beside his father's memorial tablet. One sword, Taiyuan. He opened the book and a piece of paper fell out. Northstar Shiofu, Idao, I knew you would see this book, even though I've never told you about its existence. This is the essence of the One Sword School swordsmanship, but I'm warning you, don't ever learn it. My body is getting weaker and weaker, and I don't know how much longer I can hold on. Cultivating this demonic sword technique brought me a short period of happiness, but it also brought me endless pain in the future. It's very powerful, but it's a demon that can corrode your body and spirit. Although it once brought glory to the One Sword School, that was only in the past. It doesn't belong to this era. My wrong choice is your best warning. It's a spiritual inheritance, but it's not a taboo that we should touch. Perhaps I'm no longer here after reading my message, but One Sword, you must promise me that you will never cultivate this demonic sword. Chapter 382. However, the sword still pierced through his body, cleaving his black crow body in two. The violent sword aura did not stop at all, soaring into the sky. However, Northstar Blade had already given up on life and death. He did not fear these things. He began practicing according to the Taiyuan swordplay manual. At that moment, the rain suddenly stopped, and a rainbow appeared on the horizon. What Northstar Blade did not know was that the Taiyuan swordplay manual was a cultivation manual, the ultimate swordsmanship training manual in the Spirit Chi era. However, in this age of chaos, the human body could not be tempered by Spirit Chi. How could they endure the torment of sword aura coursing through their bodies? They chased them all the way to the shrine. The ground was covered in blood, and countless Onmyoges lay in pools of their own blood. With the guilt he felt towards his parents, the guilt he felt towards Kikyu, and the self-blame he felt towards himself, this sword condensed all of Northstar One Blade's thoughts. After experiencing so many twists and turns, he accepted everything and faced it calmly. This sword was unimaginably powerful. Even the female priestess, who had been watching from the shadows, had a look of disbelief on her face. This was because he craved power. He craved the kind of power that would allow him to transcend the mortal world and rival God. In the end, the door to the underground palace was broken by the Onmyoges' frenzied attacks. They escaped from the underground palace and began to run outside. The hundreds of Onmyoges, who had once been so powerful that he could not contend with them, were now nothing to Northstar Blade. Without spirit chi, the body could not withstand the ultimate swordsmanship training method. This was the truth. Yes. At that moment, North Star Blade put down his father's letter and began to read the Taiyuan swordplay manual. Was this the swordsmanship training method that had caused his father's cultivation to go berserk? This was because he had lost even his right hand to hold the sword. How could he continue his legend? In the next few years, North Star Blade was very lonely. At the most critical moment, he did not choose to break through. He knew that no one had succeeded. Although he was a genius, this had nothing to do with talent. It was just that his body could not withstand it. North Star Blade could not help but laugh at this scene. This scene was so similar to the current him. It was the end of his life. Let's dye the sky a little redder. His father's advice and the thought of reading the Taiyuan sword manual intertwined in his mind, pressing against each other and throwing North Star Blade's mind into chaos. North Star Blade didn't know where to go. He walked and walked in a daze. During this period of time, he only had one arm, and he had to endure the ridicule and insults of the crowd. More often than not, he would become a punching bag for some people to vent their anger on. It doesn't matter. Even if I don't come, I'm not far from death. The man with the black crow was the great elder of the school of Yin Yang. Who would have thought that he would be killed by Bei Chen with a single slash? They were afraid. They didn't dare to fight anymore. The sword chi was like a dragon, and the sword heart had comprehended the power of heaven and earth. When the sword was unleashed, it was death. When the sword was retracted, it was life. It contained the formless power of heaven and earth. It was the true sword cultivator codex, and not the demonic codex as his father had said. At this time, Kikyu's smile appeared in his mind. He could imagine the picture of Kikyu crying in the dark underground palace, looking forward to the future when they would meet again, but he could only entrust all the beautiful and yearning for the future to the paintings and the paragraphs of words. What a satisfying killing! In this battle, the heartless pill in North Star Blade's hand was like a god's help. Sword energy swept across the battlefield, and the so-called powerful retainers were nothing more than fragile puppets. At this moment, North Star Blade felt the urge to tear it to pieces. Although his father had said that this ancient book had brought glory to the North Star One-Blade School, it was an inheritance. But it was precisely because of this that his father's cultivation went berserk, which led to the tragedy. In the prison, because he only had one arm, he was unable to integrate into any group for the past 10 years. He was always alone. With no worries, he swore to fight to the death with this so-called god, all to quell the evil in his heart and avenge Kikyu. But at this moment, many figures appeared at the entrance of the shrine. Amid the clamor of police sirens, countless figures squeezed through the crowd to North Star Blade's side. But the door to the underground palace was closed. North Star Blade thought back to the heartless woman wearing a witch's costume on the beach, and the promise he had made to her before she left. When the police arrived, they took North Star Blade away and saved his life. When the girl heard this, she was very surprised. North Star Blade chased after them closely. Every time the sword energy left his body, someone was killed. Although so many years had passed, the battle with Ikegami Tezuka was still a thorn in North Star Blade's heart. Although it couldn't make up for the guilt in his heart, it was the last thing he could do. Once again, North Star Blade approached with his sword. He didn't have the sharpness of the past. He looked like a hunched old man, staggering as he walked, as if he could fall at any moment. Even though he was extremely weak, he was still extremely terrifying. He became the nightmare of these yin-yang masters. To their horror, they discovered that this man had changed. He had become unimaginably powerful. But North Star Blade didn't give up. Although the sword energy gradually corroded his body and mind, and he spent several hours in a daze every day, as long as he was awake, he would practice his sword. He couldn't help but nod. Even the old man hadn't expected North Star Blade to suddenly attack. Even he felt that he couldn't block the violent sword energy that was coming at him. From now on, he was nothing more than a cripple. North Star Blade nodded slightly, walked past the priestess, and walked down the stairs into the darkness. At this moment, North Star Blade completely let go of his worries and began to flip through the ancestral inheritance, which had been called a demonic book by his father. His appearance instantly caused the terrified Yin-Yang masters to stop running. They all knelt before him. Before serving his sentence, North Star One Blade met with Aiki again. He told North Star One Blade, seeing North Star Blade fall silent again, the girl continued to encourage him. After 10 years, he felt like he didn't fit in with everything around him. It was as if he shouldn't have been here in the first place. Many of his memories had become blurred during cultivation, but there was one thing he remembered very clearly, and that was to avenge Kikyu. Although these two memories had started out very well, he couldn't accept the ending. That's my deceased father. I'm his youngest daughter. Do you know him? After that, North Star Blade began his sentence of 10 years. North Star Blade's slaughter continued. Every strand of sword energy that was extracted from his body was as painful as being cut by a knife, but he felt satisfied. But so what? North Star Blade felt that this kind of life was actually very peaceful. After all, everyone realized that he only had one arm. This step was extremely important in the Taiyuan swordplay manual. If he succeeded, all the sword energy in his body would condense into a sword orb, and he wouldn't have to endure the sword energy's torture anymore. North Star Blade finally couldn't bear the burden anymore. Blood flowed out of his orifices, and he collapsed to the ground. He stepped out into the outside world, and everything around him was filled with strangeness and coldness. At this moment they were terrified. They didn't dare fight North Star Blade, and they began to rush out of the underground palace. Kikyo had brought him out of the dark world, but he couldn't help her when she was at her weakest. They began to help North Star Blade, hiring the best lawyers, and expending a lot of manpower and resources to alleviate his crimes. Soaring Sword Intent appeared. North Star Blade didn't waste any words. He knew his body's condition. It was like a candle that had been burned out. The flame was barely flickering, but it had reached its end. So, at the last moment, he gave up on condensing the sword orb. All right. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, he was released from prison. What kind of god was this? Day after day, he used the Taiyuan swordplay manual's sword techniques to condense sword energy in his body. The crow landed on the ground, turning into an old man who had been cut in two. This attack was the eruption of all the sword energy in North Star Blade's body. This attack was unavoidable, so he chose to turn into a crow and fight it. As he cultivated, North Star Saber finally experienced just how powerful Sword Chi was. North Star Blade fell silent as he read the letter his father North Star Shifu had left him. However, North Star Blade knew that he could no longer become a legend. His arrival would always cause the priests and servants in the shrine to tremble in fear, but they still didn't stop him. They knew that someone would take care of him, just like the previous times. At the end of the day, he was just a mortal. He was no different from the seniors who cultivated sword intent. No one knew that he was once a ferocious beast. They bullied him as the weakest of weaklings. North Star Blade's spirit had long since dissipated. It was time to go. During his cultivation, he began to vomit blood. He even fell into a temporary coma. At that moment, a giant crow appeared in front of the shrine. It landed on the ground and transformed into an old man. Even though North Star Blade was lying in a pool of blood, no one dared to approach him. The sun had set, and half the sky was dyed red by the afterglow of the sun. But he'd killed people, and many at that. His sins couldn't be forgiven. What North Star Blade didn't know was that although he'd learned sword intent and sword techniques, he couldn't absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into his body. As a result, his sword intent grew stronger and stronger. However, his body gradually couldn't withstand the destructive sword energy roaming through his body. You want to stop me? Are you their god? North Star Blade stared coldly at the old man. In the past 10 years, people from the ancient sword art circle would come to visit him. However, gradually, everyone seemed to have forgotten about him. At that moment, North Star Blade's emotions were extremely complicated. Then do you want to join our club? Recently, an Indian organization appeared on the Asia server. They're stealing our resources in the game. We're gathering people to counterattack. The little girl asked again. The ancient sword art circle was a society that respected the strong. And he was just a former strong person. My father died in a competition. Although I hate you, you're a genius in the ancient sword art world. You shouldn't die like this, sword intent? Very strong. The moment North Star Blade appeared, the old man could immediately tell that North Star Blade was using sword intent and a sword technique. At that moment, a girl suddenly stood in front of North Star Blade. A violent blast of sword energy tore through North Star Blade's right arm. Then, a massive beam of sword energy pierced through the bloody mist and swept toward the old man. However, one day, Iketazuka's son, Ikutiki, found him while he was receiving treatment and told him about it. The Shikigami they worshipped could not withstand a single blow. In the face of the sharp sword energy, they all fell in a pool of blood with terrified expressions. Seeing North Star Blade appear again, the priestess's eyes were filled with helplessness and pity. He did not choose to go home, nor did he go to the familiar seaside, because these two places would remind him of his past. At that moment, North Star Blade was already very weak. Just like his father, he even trembled as he walked, like a man about to rot. Have you made your decision? You'll definitely die on this trip. Looking at the girl, North Star Blade shook his head slightly. I've heard of her before, but I don't know her. Ikumiai? Who is Iketazuka to you? Just like how he used to wander around, this time, he was still walking aimlessly. It seemed like even the heavens did not like his arrival. It was drizzling outside and gloomy clouds hung low. The outside world was filled with darkness and decadence. Cultivating sword intent did not just destroy the physical body. Before the powerful sword energy could condense into a sword sphere, it would also cause irreparable damage to the mind. This was also why the ancient sword technique circle forbade the cultivation of sword intent. No matter how hard he knocked, there was still no response. At that moment, he still stepped onto the path that his father had walked, the path of sword intent cultivation that he could not turn back from. At that moment, North Star Blade gave them a shock that they had never experienced before. Fear spread in everyone's hearts, and they did not even have the courage to go up and end North Star Blade, who had long since withered away. However, for some reason, North Star Blade, who was holding the book, felt as if it was magical, and he could not help but want to flip through it. Then I'll kill you. As he walked, he arrived at a pedestrian street. There were more and more people around him. North Star Blade slowly closed his eyes as his life gradually flowed away. Look, you only have one arm, so it should be difficult for you to find a job. Join our club, we can play games together, and we can earn money. Just think of it as helping us out. Our club is really lacking people. The girl pleaded. The girl looked sweet, and North Star Blade could not help but fall into a trance. At that moment, he thought of her. Every swing of his sword brought with it the thought of death and the dissipation of life. At that moment, North Star Blade was like a sword demon, and fear spread in the hearts of all the Yin-Yang masters. Even the Juha family, who had a grudge against him, chose to help him at this moment. On the day that he made this decision, North Star Blade wrote a will, transferring all of his assets, including his house and the ruined dojo, to the Juha family. This was the demon that North Star Hideo had mentioned. The demon was not the sword manuals that could help one comprehend the power of heaven and earth, but the cultivator himself. However, the female priestess, who was observing from the shadows, smiled. These words were better than thousands of words, and they gave North Star Blade hope to continue living. This time, North Star Blade arrived at the entrance of the underground palace without any obstruction. After that, he brought the heartless pill to the seaside and watched the ebb and flow of the tide one last time. He staggered toward the yin-yang shrine in the tide of memories. At that moment, North Star Blade did not understand why they were helping him. "Stay in there and we will wait for you to come out. We will wait for your legend to continue. All the ancient sword styles will be your home." Looking at North Star Blade's pale face and weak appearance, the female priestess could not imagine what he had gone through. Although she could not bear to see him die, she still made way for him. The moment had finally come. North Star Blade had given up, and he had no intention of leaving this place alive. After training hard, North Star Blade reached a stage that his father had failed to break through, and that was to form a sword pill. Looking at Ikazumi, North Star Blade thought of the mistake he had made in the past. The girl's pleading appearance also reminded him of the first time he met the Kikyu. However, what North Star Blade did not expect was that the entire ancient sword arts circle began to mobilize. "Hello, my name is Ikazumi. Our Battle Asia Club is currently recruiting members. Would you like to join?" the little girl asked expectantly. However, North Star Blade smiled. Chapter 383. After the machine was started, the nutrient solution rose in the chamber. North Star Blade's vision began to blur as he switched to the virtual interface. When the screen faded away and the character selection interface appeared, North Star Blade began to understand the introductions of each starting character. Suddenly, IK poked his right hand and said, "Blade, wait for a moment. Sister Atom and the others have gone to Uncle Goo to collect the newly forged weapons. They'll take you to level up later." However, they knew nothing about guild operations. During this period, many players joined the Moonlight Guild that they established, but basically, they did not stay for long and left. Therefore, the 5 of them had the idea of forming a big guild. After some discussion, they realized that they all had the same idea. "It's your turn, new member. Introduce yourself." After introducing all the members of the Moonlight Squad, Adam Inoue said with a smile. North Star Blade was taken aback. He couldn't help but glance at Ikazumi, and then said, after some explanation, North Star Blade finally understood how to use the gaming chamber. Then, he entered the gaming chamber according to the method taught by Adam and the others. The 4 of them did not look down on the one-armed North Star Blade, but deep down, they were undoubtedly a little uncomfortable. Following the method taught by Adam, he clicked on the game icon of Battle Online. Therefore, they came up with the idea of recruiting core players in reality and recruiting a large number of players when the core team was strong enough. Gazing at the screen and listening to the old voice narrating the history of the Demon's Pine continent, North Star Blade slowly let down his guard and gradually immersed himself in the game. Naturally, they did not miss the opportunity to download the game when Battle Online was launched on the Asia server. Then, they brought him to the living room upstairs. After the discussion, Adam and the others decided to bring North Star Blade to level up. North Star Blade was stunned. After some thought, he said, "I don't have any objections. Little May." Therefore, during the 10 years in prison, he thought it through and gave up on the idea of swordsmanship. At this moment, North Star Blade was shocked again. He tried to raise his right arm and clenched his fist. The feeling was strange and familiar, but it was so real. Ikazumi pointed at North Star Blade as she spoke. "Sister Atom, the seniors in the Kendo Club don't like to play games. They're very old-fashioned, and I couldn't persuade them at all. So I went to the streets to look for people. Although I met a few people who played Battle Online, they were all unwilling to join our small club. He was the only one who was willing. One Blade, what a strange name. Do you know how to play games?" Little May jumped out and asked. The moment he entered the game, the vast demonic ridge continent appeared in front of him. Under Ikazumi's guidance, North Star Blade arrived at a villa on the outskirts of the town. Hearing this, Ikazumi pouted. The sky was filled with stars, and the town was brightly lit at night. There was no doubt that the gaming experience was extremely satisfying. However, as the Asia server was a region with many countries mixed together, there were bound to be conflicts between them. After that, Adami Inoue provided his own villa in the suburbs and pooled funds with Iwai and the others to purchase a batch of gaming chambers upstairs, intending to use it as the first stronghold of the guild's development. In truth, if she weren't Yumi, North Star Blade would have rejected her as well. At that time, Iwai patted her chest and promised that there would be no problem, but the truth was that she messed it up. As if realizing something, Adami Inoue quickly retracted his right hand, then extended his left hand with an apologetic look on his face. The people in this house were all gaming enthusiasts, and their families were very wealthy, including Iwai whose family owned a kendo club. It could be said that all of them were second-generation rich, and they were usually very good friends. All of this really shocked North Star Blade. However, since North Star Blade was already here, even though they felt helpless, they still brought North Star Blade to the second floor. They picked out a room for him and a dedicated gaming cabin. However, at this moment, he suddenly remembered what Ikazumi had said to him back then. The first thing he thought of was sword, but after 10 years in prison, he felt that he would never touch a sword again. Hearing this, everyone's face showed an awkward smile, then they all looked at Iwai. However, Iwai felt very embarrassed to go back like this, so she made a move to recruit people on the pedestrian street. However, in the face of Iwai's invitation, although the passers-by were curious, none of them agreed. Uncle Gu is a native here, which means he's an NPC. He's an intermediate blacksmith, very powerful, and can help us reforge and enhance the weapons we bought in the shop. As if they were discussing the crisis of their country, when the debate heated up, everyone's face turned red, leaving North Star Blade dumbfounded. He could not believe that technology had developed so quickly in the past 10 years. 10 years ago, although he had not played games, he knew about the existence of virtual reality helmets, but he did not expect that technology had reached the point where he could immerse himself in the game. At this moment, he met North Star Blade. Adami Inoue and the others had nothing to say to Iwai who could find another excuse. This kind of domineering behavior caused many players to be dissatisfied, and they joined forces several times to fight back, finally suppressing the arrogance of the Indian players. We want an expert who can punish the Indian team who robbed our resources. Adami Inoue said helplessly. Sword. His body trembled as he slowly raised his right hand. They had even blocked the entrance to the withered bone forest, forcing other players to pay to enter. Who's Uncle Gu? North Star Blade could not help but ask curiously. He did not remember such a member of the Moonlight Party. Little May, didn't I ask you to bring some experts from your kendo gym? He's the kendo gym expert? A woman walked up to Little May, pointed at her head, and scolded softly. When it came to core players, the first person they thought of was Iwai. Hello, my name is Adami Inoue. Nice to meet you. The Moonlight Society welcomes you. This time, the other 4 people raised their hands in agreement. No, I've never played games before. North Star Blade shook his head honestly. North Star Blade smiled indifferently, and also extended his left hand to shake Adami Inoue's. At this stage, the most powerful force in the Asia server was undoubtedly the Indian player camp. At this time, 2 men and 2 women were sitting on the sofa in the living room of the villa, chatting. When they saw the door open, their faces showed a look of anticipation. You can call me One Blade. However, when they saw that there was only one person behind Iwai, and this person only had 1 arm, disappointment was written on their faces. It was precisely because of this environment that the players of the Asia server formed several camps, and each camp was a collective of players from their respective countries. Conflicts between them constantly intensified because of the Asia server's resources. North Star Blade nodded, and then began to look around curiously. Practicing sword will, was a huge burden and damage to his body. Even if he did not lose his right arm, according to the doctor, he only had 15 to 16 years to live. He had spent the last 10 years in prison, and there was not much time left. How could he wield a sword with such a crippled body? He recognized the identity of this person at a glance, and immediately stepped forward. After officially entering the game, he found himself in a huge square. The passers-by around him were dressed in a completely different style from the modern world, and the atmosphere was very ancient. It's shocking, isn't it? I was just like you when I played it for the first time. This game is groundbreaking. In order to get this game to be released in the Asia server earlier, I even went to the official forum to protest. Therefore, I might have contributed to the early release of this game. May began her daily bragging again. Upon hearing this, Northstar Blade's expression froze. However, what made them helpless was that Northstar Blade did not know how to use the gaming cabin. They had no choice but to teach him step by step. What? Northstar Blade, who was about to ask, was suddenly stunned. He had lost a whole 10 years, so even when he entered the game, he did not pay attention to his right arm. However, when May touched him just now, he actually felt the tactile feedback from his right arm again. There's strength in numbers. Although he only has one arm now, can't he recover in the game? Therefore, he's the number 1 player in our human wave strategy. However, he felt guilty towards the Iwai family, and in the face of May's request, he still agreed. This was human nature. For unfamiliar and incomplete people, there would still be alienation in the depths of one's heart. After all, awareness and skill in the game were directly linked to reality. May's family was the owner of a kendo dojo and had many experts. Therefore, they sent May to recruit a few experts from the kendo dojo to join their team. Northstar Blade's expression gradually turned resolute. Upon seeing this, May said guiltily. Upon hearing this, Atami Inoue turned to the other 4 people again and slammed the table. However, although there was no collective domineering behavior, the provocative behavior of the small groups was still ongoing. Among them, May's Moonlight team was the most affected. They were chased out by the Indian team several times while they were training in the Withered Bone Forest. It could be said that they had a deep grudge against them. At this time, a girl in leather armor not far away waved at him excitedly. After that, with Atami Inoue's introduction, Northstar Blade shook hands with the other 3 people in the room one by one. You must be scared now. This is one of the dark technologies of Battle Online. All your flaws in reality can be restored in the game. My Battle Online is truly invincible. May continued to show off at the side as if the game was opened by her family. Her expression was filled with pride and arrogance. After that, they began to try to expand their guild. How does it feel? The realism of this game shocked him, as someone who had never played a game before. It was as if he had really transmigrated to another world and was not just playing a game. Isn't it just a game? Northstar Blade listened quietly and did not say a word. By chance, he walked into the new world of Battle Online. By the way, Blade, what weapon are you used to using? Our Asian server has no restrictions on weapons. We're taking the evolutionary route. This is a major feature of our server. You can use anything. Then let's take Blade to level up today. Let's not fight with the Hindustanis for now and accumulate our strength. What do you think, Blade? At this time, Atami Inoue suddenly turned to look at Northstar Blade. Looking at May, who was very proud of herself, the rest of the people in the room also showed a helpless expression. They felt that it was really not reliable to let her do things. We'll wait for your legend to continue. None of the seniors were willing to join the Moonlight Core Guild that they had formed. Then, under Northstar Blade's astonished gaze, the 5 of them began to discuss the enemy's tactics with a serious expression. In fact, Northstar Blade did not know much about characters. After a while, he still followed Atomi's recommendation and chose a strong paragon. It's a human wave tactic. He doesn't need a strong one. Let him choose a tank. Yes, that's it. As a country with a large population, they made full use of the human wave tactic in the game. They suppressed other forces in various ways and tyrannically seized resources. Chapter 384. Hearing Northstar Blade mention the word sword, Ikazumi could not help but chuckle. Do you know how to use a sword too? Do you want me to teach you? I'm pretty good with a sword. When Northstar Blade heard this, he shook his head. I know. Forget it if you don't want to learn. Don't blame me for not reminding you that you've already missed a chance to receive pointers from a master swordsman. You should know that others can't even get the chance to learn from me even if they spend money. Growing up in the kendo gym, Ikazumi's swordsmanship was barely passable. However, facing Northstar Blade, she could not help but feel a sense of superiority. She felt that although she could not compare to her senior brothers, she was definitely a master in front of Northstar Blade. However, Northstar Blade's rejection disappointed her. She felt that she had lost another chance to show off. Right, I'll transfer 50 soul coins to you. Go to the shop and buy a sword that you like. As she spoke, Ikazumi opened the trading interface and transferred 50 soul coins to Northstar Blade. Although Kazumi appeared to be very heroic, Northstar Blade could still see the pain hidden deep within her expression. After opening the game shop interface, Northstar Blade began to learn how to buy equipment under Ikazumi's guidance. Shop main page, equipment category, weapon category, sword category. After choosing to enter the sword category, a dazzling array of sword-type weapons came into view. There were so many types that even a swordsman like Northstar Blade was astonished. However, he could not buy all of these weapons. Many of them were extremely expensive. Coupled with the level restriction, he could not use them at all. Therefore, under Ikazumi's guidance, Northstar Blade once again narrowed the range of weapon choices. He reduced the range of sword weapons to within 50 soul coins, and the level restriction was 0 to 5. However, the number of sword-type weapons that appeared in the shop interface was still incomparably large. Glancing at these weapons, Northstar Blade began to choose his first weapon in the game. At this moment, Northstar Blade was exceptionally serious. He had always remembered his father's teachings when he taught him swordsmanship. The sword is your name, and it is also your dignity. A swordsman might not leave anything behind after his death, but the sword is different. It will be imprinted with your past glory. Whenever the future generations think of the sword, they will think of you first. For Northstar Blade, who had received this education since he was young, choosing a weapon was undoubtedly equivalent to choosing a partner that would always be by his side. Looking at the hesitant Northstar Blade was speechless. In her opinion, it was just a weapon that had an early stage. Are there any weapons that can grow along with the player's level? Northstar Blade asked as he looked at the various weapons displayed in the shop's interface. Huh! Ikazumi revealed a dumbfounded expression. I don't like switching weapons. I need a weapon that can grow with me, Northstar Blade said in a serious tone. How is that possible? This is a game. It's impossible not to change your equipment. Low-level equipment is definitely going to be eliminated, Kazumi answered immediately. No, I'm talking about swords, not other equipment. That's not possible either. Unless it's a hidden weapon or a special weapon that's specially forged, it's basically impossible. Up until now, our Asia server has never produced such a weapon. Juhame was a little speechless right now. Northstar Blade was clearly a noob, but why did he have such a big heart? He was practically on par with her. Really? Northstar Blade asked, clearly disappointed. It's not like there aren't any. There's a super player in the original server called Roving Sword. I heard that all 9 of his swords are growth-type weapons, so you'll have to work hard to get his weapons in the future cross-server battles. Ikazumi stood on her tiptoes and patted Northstar Blade on the shoulder to comfort him. In fact, Yumi did not think that Northstar One Blade could do it at all. This was because she had gone to the original server's forum and watched Aojian's battle videos. The sword skill displayed by Aojian could be described as extraordinary. She believed that even the great senior brother of her kendo gym would not be a match for that super player. As for a noob like Northstar Blade, there was no hope for him to defeat that super player. There's a kendo master in the game? Northstar Blade was stunned. Yes, he's super strong. He's known as the cheater in the original server. I reckon that he would have no problem fighting a guild in our Asia server now. Speaking of this, Ikazumi's face revealed an envious expression. I got it. Northstar Blade nodded, but a glimmer of anticipation flashed in his eyes. He had defeated all the masters of the ancient kendo sect before he was 20 years old. These masters represented the highest level of kendo attainments in Japan. It could be said that Northstar Blade had reached the pinnacle of kendo at that time. Hence, he was now curious about the kendo master in the distant original server. Hurry up and choose. You're such a dilly-dallying person, Ikazumi said with dissatisfaction. Northstar Blade smiled apologetically and was about to continue looking at the weapons in the shop. At this moment, the figures of Atami Inoue and the others appeared in the distance. They quickly walked toward Northstar Blade and the others. We've changed our weapons. We can go now. The leader, Atami Inoue, led the other 3 members of the Moonlight Squad to Northstar Blade's side. We're not done yet. One Blade seems to have difficulty choosing. We're waiting for him to choose his weapon, Ikazumi said helplessly. Weapon? It's fine if you don't choose. You can level up quickly in the early stages anyway. You can just follow us and gain experience. You can change your weapon when your level is high. It'll save you money, Atami Inoue said nonchalantly. No, he wants a weapon that can level up with his level. It's like the proud sword of the original server, Ikazumi continued. Hearing this, Atami Inoue and the others had a stunned look on their faces. Are you serious? Atami Inoue turned to look at Northstar Blade and asked. It's fine if you don't. It's just a game. I'm sorry for the trouble, Northstar Blade said apologetically. Why do you want this kind of weapon? Atami Inoue asked curiously. I'm obsessed with swords. Changing weapons frequently makes me very uncomfortable, Northstar Blade said truthfully. It's not like you're changing wives. You're so unreasonable. You're just like my brother. He said the same thing. Ikazumi pouted, clearly dissatisfied. Hearing this, Northstar Blade smiled awkwardly again. He felt that there was no need to fuss about such things in the game. Hey, One Blade, are you also a swordsman? Otherwise, why would you have such an idea? Ikazumi suddenly said. Yes. Which dojo are you from? Are you from the modern gorgeous-style dojo? As she said this, Ikazumi's face suddenly revealed a look of disdain. As a member of the ancient swordsmanship circle, Ikazumi was influenced by what she saw and heard. She also looked down on the gorgeous style. I'm just casually practicing. I'm not from any sect. Northstar Blade did not reveal his identity. Is it a left-handed swordsmanship? Ikazumi continued to ask like a curious baby. Something like that. Little May, don't mess around. Don't mention left-handed things to One Blade. At this time, Atami Inoue suddenly walked to Ikazumi's side and pressed her head to stop her from being presumptuous. At this time, Northstar Blade said, It's okay. Let's go level up first. We won't choose a weapon for now. Don't be in such a hurry. Why don't you come with us to find Uncle Gu? He can modify and forge weapons. There should be something suitable for you. Although it can't be done as you level up, a custom-made weapon will definitely be more suitable for you than a weapon template in the market. Northstar Blade did not refuse. He also longed for a new weapon. Then, he followed Atami Inoue and the others to the east of the spawn point. Walking on the streets of Brahma Sky City, there were many players walking back and forth. Their clothes were very suitable for the current environment. It was impossible to tell who was a player and who was a native NPC. Under Adami Inoue's lead, the Moonlight Party turned into an alley beside a bustling street and kept walking inside. The deeper they went, the higher the temperature in the air. From time to time, they could hear the sound of metal clanking coming from the end of the alley. When they reached the corner at the end of the alley, a forging room of about 100 square meters appeared in front of them. Inside, a huge forging furnace was emitting flames, and rolling waves of heat radiated in all directions. In front of the furnace stood a bare-chested man. He carried a big iron hammer and had a pipe in his mouth. At this moment, he was hammering a piece of iron. The muscles on his right arm trembled with every collision between the hammer and the metal. "Uncle Gu." Adami Inoue greeted the man respectfully. Why are you here again? Are you not satisfied with the weapon?" The man called Uncle Gu turned around. At this moment, Northstar Blade was surprised to find that the man had only one eye. His right eye had been replaced by a silver-white metal ball. "Hee, Uncle Gu, we would like to ask you to forge a weapon for my partner," Ikazumi said mischievously. "No problem. As long as the soul coins are in place, I will forge a divine weapon for you," Uncle Gu answered readily after taking 2 puffs of his cigarette. "Uncle Gu, you are just an intermediate blacksmith. Don't brag." Ikazumi made a face. "So what if I am an intermediate blacksmith? As long as the soul coins are in place, I might be able to forge a divine weapon." Even though his act was exposed, Uncle Gu did not blush. "All right, tell me. What weapon do you want to forge this time? What style do you want?" Uncle Gu exhaled a thick cloud of smoke and continued to ask. Hearing this, Juhame and the others turned to look at Northstar Blade. "Can you forge weapons that increase in level with your level?" Although Northstar Blade was a little embarrassed to ask this, he felt that he could not be careless when it came to weapons. "Brother, are you here to cause trouble?" Uncle Gu's eyes widened. At this moment, he suddenly wanted to say, "I am just an intermediate blacksmith. Do you really want me to forge a divine weapon?" "If not, then forget it," Northstar Blade replied awkwardly. "What do you mean forget it? Why do I feel that you are becoming more and more like a troublemaker? Give me a goal first. If you can't achieve it, then forget it. Aren't you insulting me?" Uncle Gu's eyes widened. The veins on his right arm that was holding the hammer were throbbing. He looked like he was ready to strike at any moment. This made Adam Inoue and the others tremble in fear. They had seen Uncle Gu's details panel. He was a powerful existence above level 80. No one in their team could withstand a single hit from his hammer. After playing Battle Online for so long, they knew very well that the NPCs in Battle Online were not simple artificial intelligence. They had their own thoughts. Recently, a player from the Asia server had been harassing a female native. As a result, he was chased to the safe zone and did not dare to return. This made them realize that some NPCs were masters that they could not afford to offend. "Uncle Gu, I'm really sorry. He is a newbie. Please don't be angry," Ikazumi immediately said. "I'm sorry. I was rude." Northstar Blade also quickly expressed his apology. Uncle Gu seemed to realize that Northstar Blade's words were unintentional. He put down his hammer and snorted coldly. "The minimum requirement for the growth-type weapon you want is epic or even legendary level. Even if I have the ability to forge it, you won't be able to afford the materials needed to forge such a weapon. One must be down to earth. Don't bite off more than you can chew." Hearing this, Northstar Blade could not help but feel a little disappointed. However, at this moment Uncle Gu's tone changed. "However, don't look down on me. I may only be an intermediate blacksmith, but I do have the ability to forge a beginner growth-type weapon. However, the materials needed to forge a beginner growth-type weapon are extremely special. I'm afraid none of you have the guts to try it." "Uncle, we are players. We are not afraid of death. This won't scare us. Can you really forge it? Give each of us one, Ikazumi said curiously. Hearing this, Uncle Goo's face revealed a helpless expression. It's not as simple as you think. This kind of forging requires you to use your own body as a material to forge a weapon. Do you dare to do it? Moreover, once your body is successfully forged into a weapon, that part of your body will not be able to be reborn even in the game. It will always be your weapon. As if afraid that they would not believe him, Uncle Goo put down his hammer and walked into the room. A moment later, he came out with a sheepskin scroll and spread it on the ground. Out of curiosity, North Star Blade and the others turned to look at the scroll. Flesh and Blood Forging, Incomplete Manual, Special, Item Introduction, a God Weapon Manual created by the demon god of the Demon's Pine Continent, Bloodwave. Due to the War of the Ancient Gods, this manual is incomplete. Only the Flesh and Blood Forging chapter is left. This chapter uses one's own flesh and soul as the core forging materials to forge a special growth-type weapon that is one with one's own flesh and soul. Game notification. Please use this forging manual with caution. The body parts used as forging materials will disappear from the game forever. Uncle Goo took 2 puffs of his cigarette and said, "How about it? Do you dare to do it? Can I use my hair?" Ikazumi could not help but ask softly. Ahem. Uncle Goo could not help but cough when he heard that. He then glared at Ikazumi. "I want to forge a sword. What do I have to pay?" North Star Blade asked. "You dare?" Uncle Goo's eyes widened when he heard North Star Blade's words. North Star Blade nodded lightly. "Kid, you're not joking, right?" "This isn't a joke," Uncle Goo continued to ask in disbelief. However, North Star Blade still nodded. He did not look like he was joking. After sizing up North Star Blade again, Uncle Goo said, "Flesh and Blood Forging. Since the weapon you want is a sword, the left arm, left leg, or right leg will do." North Star Blade was silent for a moment when he heard Uncle Goo's words. He then said, "How about the right arm?" This time, Atomy Inoue and the others widened their eyes. They felt that North Star Blade had lost his mind. This wasn't a joke. These body parts would disappear from the game forever. The word huge couldn't even begin to describe this loss. Ikazumi immediately hugged North Star Blade's right arm and said anxiously, "Blade, don't be impulsive. It's not easy for you to have a right arm. I've lost it for too long. It's not easy to get used to having it again. I'm used to using my left hand. Moreover, using a sword with my left hand will be starting from scratch. I can recomprehend swordsmanship. Who knows, I might even be able to reach greater heights." North Star Blade smiled calmly. "You just don't understand swordsmanship. A swordsman's right arm is the key. How can the left arm be as nimble as the right arm?" As a professional, Ikazumi immediately criticized. North Star Blade felt a warmth in his heart when he saw Ikazumi's reproachful expression. However, he did not refute her. How could he not know the importance of a right arm to a swordsman? However, it had been a full 10 years. During these 10 years, he had long gotten used to living without a right arm. In North Star Blade's heart, his right arm had long since disappeared along with the soaring sword aura that cut through the sky. Although regaining a lost arm was a pleasant surprise, it was ultimately just an illusion. In reality, he was still one-armed. He was willing to trade this illusory right arm for a peerless sword that had accompanied him as he grew in the game. "You want to use your left hand to wield a sword?" Uncle Goo was also a little surprised. "Why not? If you can forge a sword, I don't mind giving up my right arm." North Star Blade smiled calmly. Hearing this, a drop of sweat dripped down Uncle Goo's forehead. He had originally wanted to use the Forged by Flesh skill book to scare them off, but he did not expect them to be so unafraid of death. In reality, as an intermediate blacksmith, he was not confident that he could forge such a growth-type weapon. Even if North Star Blade dared to do so, he would not dare. The consequence of failure was that his right arm would disappear, and the weapon would not be formed. "Give me a moment. Let me think about it," Uncle Goo said as he turned around and entered the small house, then closed the door. After that, he quickly opened the NPC friend panel and found Han Yuanwu's profile picture. He opened the chat box and reported what had happened on his side. Although he knew that they were players, Uncle Goo knew that the forged by flesh was no joke. They really needed to forge that part of their flesh and soul into a weapon. This was not as simple as losing a right arm in the game. In reality, the right arm would also lose its senses because the soul of the right arm would also disappear during the forging process. As the person in charge of the Asia server, after receiving the message from Uncle Goo, Han Yuanwu immediately sent it back to Lu Wu and asked for his opinion. Although the players were willing, they still needed to use their real right arm to forge. This risky decision was out of his control. After all, he had no control over the part of the soul. The authority was all with Lu Wu. Soon, Lu Wu received Han Yuanwu's reply. Initially, Lu Wu wanted to reject such an absurd request. After all, forging a weapon in the game would cause the body in reality to disappear. How could this still be considered a game? It was too cruel. Lu Wu, who had a strong sense of morality, firmly rejected it. However, out of curiosity, he looked up North Star Blade's information. After looking at North Star Blade's information, Lu Wu was shocked to find out that this guy was a super genius in swordsmanship. Moreover, he happened to lose his right arm in reality. In other words, even if the soul of his right arm disappeared, it would not affect him in reality. Moreover, after a detailed understanding, Lu Wu found out that North Star Blade's talent in swordsmanship could no longer be described as strong. He could be said to be the polar opposite of Ao Jian. Ao Jian was obsessed with swordsmanship. He understood swordsmanship and did not care about anything in the secular world. He was an extreme sword fanatic. Such a state of mind and talent made him extremely compatible with swordsmanship. As long as he had a sword in his hand, he would be invincible. North Star Blade, on the other hand, was at the other extreme. His sword had feelings in it, and he used it for love. In the beginning, he started using the sword because of his parents' expectations. This was the sword of kinship. However, after the death of his parents, his sword of kinship turned into the sword of vengeance. Then, he met Kikyu again. When Kikyu left, he swore that he would rescue Kikyu from the underground palace. This sword became the sword of promise. After Kikyu's death, in order to calm the resentment in his heart and to vent his anger, this sword became the sword of slaughter. Now, the guilt of the past made North Star Blade want to hold a sword again. This time, it was the sword of Guardian. The sharpness of a treasured sword is honed, and the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. This sentence could not be more suitable for North Star Blade. He was a person who wielded the sword with love. With his strong talent in swordsmanship, his rough life had made his heart of the sword more solid. At this time, his heart of the sword was not weaker than Ao Jian's. He was a true super-talented player. Lu Wu would naturally welcome such a super-talented player to join him with both hands and feet. Thus, he quietly took out his little notebook and wrote down 4 words, North Star Blade. After that, he dragged Tong Gua, who was playing landlord with the Rock Ghost King and the others in the artifact space, and gave him a new task. Under Tong Gua's reluctant expression, he disguised him and sent him to Brahma Sky City. Chapter 385. As North Star Blade and the others watched in astonishment, Tong Gua picked up the flesh and blood forging parchment scroll on the ground and began to look at it critically. To North Star Blade, this kind of pain was far more unbearable than death, but he still clenched his teeth and persevered. "You only know how to be mean to me," Tong Gua muttered, feeling wronged. A moment later, a space passage appeared in front of him, and a figure emerged from it. After walking out of the room, the arrogance on Tong Gua's face faded. He chuckled and quickly ran toward the tavern marked on the map. Uncle Gu, since when did you have a big brother? Among all the blacksmiths in Brahma Sky City, you seem to be the only one with the surname Gu, Ikazumi asked curiously. Well, let's begin. As he spoke, Tong Gua took out the materials he brought from the space and placed them on the forging table. Then, he picked up Gu Shu's iron hammer. If you dare to buy wine, I'll confiscate all your soul coins. Can I use my hair? Ikazumi asked softly. It's useless. It's a special forging and the pain can't be blocked. You'll have to endure it if you want to continue. Tong Gua looked at Ikazumi with a serious expression. I've contacted my big brother through a secret method just now. He'll come and help me forge a growing weapon later. But I still have to ask you again, are you sure you want to forge it? Won't you regret it? The pain made Northstar Blade feel as if his soul had left his body. The physical sensation was minimal, but it was a deeper level of extreme pain that he did not know where it came from. Except for Northstar Blade, Ikazumi and the others suddenly had the same thought, and they suddenly became a little excited. No, it's better to fix it. Tong Gua immediately shook his head and refused. A hidden character. Oh yes, I'm your big brother. Tong Gua nodded in realization. Of course, it's just flesh and blood forging. I can forge anything, Tong Gua said arrogantly. Tong Gua suddenly said to Northstar Blade. Han Yuanwu was stunned. He obviously did not understand what Tong Gua was saying. As the strongest blacksmith in Beiki, apart from having a high talent in forging, he was also very passionate about this journey. However, the repetitive forging had already made him lose interest in it. However, Tong Gua's passion was once again aroused by the forging of flesh and blood. Can we continue? Tong Gua could not help but ask. However, he did not get distracted this time. Instead, he headed straight for the blacksmith's shop that Lu Wu had marked. Big brother, you're here. Gu Dashu rushed forward and shouted at Tong Gua. The instant the hammer came into contact with Northstar Blade's right arm, specks of black light seeped out of the pores on his arm. You, come here. He pushed open the door, looked at Northstar Blade, and cleared his throat. That? Are you the blacksmith sent by the higher-ups? Han Yuanwu asked cautiously. Without the slightest hesitation, Northstar Blade placed his right arm on the forging table. However, after weighing it in his hand, Tong Gua could not help but pout. He threw it aside and took out his legendary grade forging hammer from the space. Knowing that this person was a super blacksmith, Uncle Gu did not dare to be impudent. He quickly nodded and pointed at Northstar Blade. As he spoke, Tong Gua raised his hammer. The gemstone embedded in the forging hammer began to shine. He then swung it down and smashed it on Northstar Blade's right arm. His body began to tremble involuntarily due to the extreme pain. You're inhumane. I want human rights. Even if you're the boss, you can't exploit me like this, Tong Gua said angrily. Ahem, my big brother lives in seclusion in the city. He doesn't show himself under normal circumstances, Gu Dashu answered immediately. Gu Dashu saw this and stared at Tong Gua, who was hammering spiritual materials, while smelting the ores. He was obviously trying to learn something from Tong Gua. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Ikazumi immediately bowed and apologized when she saw that the situation was not right. Atami Inoue and the others could not help but glare at Ikazumi, fearing that she would make a mistake again. Legendary forging hammer. Gu Dashu was shocked when he saw the hammer in Tong Gua's hand. Hee, put your right arm on the table. Therefore, after knowing that Uncle Gu's big brother might be a hidden NPC, they all wanted to befriend him. Upon hearing this, Tong Gua nodded. He raised the legendary forging hammer again and smashed it down. You said it yourself. Bang. However, what surprised Han Yuanwu was that this person looked very similar to the blacksmith, Gu Dashu. However, he had an indescribable aura of a ruffian. He did not look like a good person. Moreover, this kind of flesh and blood casting could not be carried out alone. It needed to be forged with both the body and the soul at the same time. Even if North Star Blade's right arm was chopped off, it would not work. Atomy Inoue and the others who were watching could not help but tremble. Get lost and complete the mission. No. No problem. Come on. North Star Blade looked exhausted and stuttered when he spoke. No problem. Why are you standing there? Throw the obsidian, companion stone, and demonic heart agate into the furnace and smelt them. Tong Gua looked at Gu Dashu and said with dissatisfaction. It's going to hurt. Are you ready? Tong Gua said with a smile. How about this? You should lie down first. I'll fix it for you. Gu Dashu was speechless. Gu Dashu nodded and picked out 3 types of ores from the casting table. He threw them into the furnace and continued to speed up the melting of the ores. Ah! The veins on North Star Blade's forehead bulged. He looked like he was in extreme pain. It was Tong Gua's first time trying this kind of flesh and blood casting. He was inexplicably excited. He had only one thought in his mind. Since he had come to the Demonic Ridge region, he had to bring back some specialty wine. Sure enough, I'm only suitable for forging weapons with my hair, Ikazumi said softly as she looked at North Star Blade. By the way, didn't Uncle Gu say that he wanted Big Brother to help him forge? Why do I feel like he's just an assistant now? Ikazumi asked softly. North Star Blade and the others turned around and saw a middle-aged man who looked very similar to Uncle Gu. Tong Gua was speechless. Cut the crap and start forging. Don't waste my time. I'm making dozens of soul coins per minute, Tong Gua said arrogantly. With every strike of Tong Gua's hammer, the impurities in the spiritual materials would turn into black ashes and splatter out. North Star Blade nodded solemnly. North Star Blade felt helpless. He was very confident in his pain tolerance. After all, he did not even cry out in pain when his right arm exploded. Tong Gua began to choose from the materials. After taking out the spiritual materials that needed to be hammered, he began hammering them. Come on, I'm not afraid of pain, North Star Blade said solemnly. My King Bomb. Tong Gua, who had just appeared in Blazing Sky City, suddenly said through gritted teeth. Tong Gua felt helpless as he looked at North Star Blade, who was on the verge of collapsing. Once, twice. Is this the first time you've seen this blueprint? Are you sure it's okay? Ikazumi asked worriedly. Upon hearing this, Han Yuanwu was embarrassed. Do you need me to bring you to the Ancient Tree's blacksmith shop? North Star Blade's voice became hoarse from Tong Gua's hammering. In the end, Tong Gua gagged his mouth so that he could not make a sound. Wait, Blade, lower your pain threshold first, Ikazumi could not help but say. Although her gaze was still critical, the forging method of the flesh and blood forging blueprint shocked Tong Gua. Can you really take it? Tong Gua asked again. Although Tong Gua looked unattractive, Han Yuanwu was very respectful. After all, the unattractive man sent last time was a god. Han Yuanwu was very cautious at this moment. Oh boss, can I borrow some soul coins to spend after completing the task? I've been losing all my soul coins playing cards recently. Tong Gua could not help but ask for more when Lu Wu agreed. Not bad. Not bad. Tong Gua heard this and looked at North Star Blade. After sizing him up, he nodded and said, however, since Tong Gua had requested it, he had no choice but to follow Tong Gua's instructions. He lay on the casting table and asked Tong Gua to tie himself to the casting table with a black rope. After receiving Lu Wu's feedback, Han Yuanwu began to wait. Very good, young man. You have some guts. You're similar to me when I was young. Not bad, the ancient tree nodded with admiration. At this moment, Lu Wu's voice suddenly rang in Tong Gua's mind. The smile on Tong Gua's face instantly froze. Come on. North Star Blade nodded and said. That's right. What can I do for you? Tong Gua raised his eyebrows, showing his arrogance again. Beside him, the ancient tree was constantly stirring up the flame in the casting furnace. The original orange flame gradually turned black, and waves of heat radiated in all directions. Mei and the others could not help but take a few steps back. "No need, I can handle it." Mei and the others were speechless. There were many NPCs in Brahma Sky City now, and there were indeed hidden NPCs. Some hidden NPCs would even bring the players to train after their intimacy with the players increased. "No problem. Let's begin. You go start the fire." "Big brother, you seem to have a bad memory." At this moment, in the blacksmith shop, the ancient tree, who had received the feedback from the higher-ups, knew that someone would come to help. He was relieved, knowing that his pretentious act would come to fruition. He knew very well that the pain from the soul was unbearable, which was why he repeatedly warned Tong Gua. However, it was obvious that North Star Blade was not prepared. "Finish the task quickly. I'll give you time to buy some wine. Otherwise, no deal." North Star Blade heard this and immediately walked to Tong Gua's side. Tong Gua silently rolled up his sleeves. At this moment, he wanted to beat someone up. "Who's the ancient tree?" At this moment, a figure appeared at the blacksmith shop's door. "No need, I have a map. I can go there by myself." Tong Gua immediately rejected him. He then walked out of Han Yuanwu's room with his familiar steps and headed to the task location marked by Han Yuanwu. "Big brother, this is the person who wants to build a flesh cast." "Is I, Tong Gua, a blacksmith who only builds equipment in his eyes? Is there any human rights or the law?" Tong Gua continued to complain. This part is quite creative. The demon god who created this thing is quite capable." Looking at Mei, who had instantly surrendered, Tong Gua suddenly felt that this attitude was very familiar. It was as if he had seen it somewhere before. "Big brother, it's done," the ancient tree shouted at Tong Gua. TSK, impressive. Why didn't I think of this?" Chapter 386. Looking at Mei and the others who were waiting for a reply, Tong Gua could only say, after that, Tong Gua kept repeating the process. After a round of thanks, North Star Blade and the others left. Since he was worried about Ancient Tree's ability as an intermediate blacksmith, Lu Wu had sent Master Blacksmith Tong Gua over. Not to mention the ability to grow by killing monsters, it was the first time they had heard of such an attribute in the game. Weapon Binder, North Star Blade, unique. At that moment, a high-pitched scream was heard. Tong Gua, who was about to pick up the right arm, shivered in fear. "Hiss! Oh, big brother, the 3 metals have been smelted." With every hammer strike, a stream of light would overflow from the legendary forging hammer, constantly repairing the cracks in North Star Blade's right arm, allowing the internal fusion to continue. At that moment, North Star Blade, Mei, and the others all had an expectant look on their faces. During the half-hour wait, Tong Gua observed the flesh forging instructions several times and carved the symbols on the blade. Soon, the blade was covered with all kinds of runes. As the two temperatures clashed, cracks began to appear on North Star Blade's transparent right arm. Soon, the elongated sword embryo was formed. Skill notes. This skill is ineffective against players. Instead, it is used to deprive players of EXP. After killing a player, you will gain a small amount of EXP. The amount of EXP taken from the target player will be deducted. "Brother, do you have any soul coins? Lend me some." Ancient Tree had no complaints. At that moment, he just wanted to learn from this blacksmith master. Hence, he eagerly went to start a fire as an assistant. Once this process was completed, the weapon could transform into North Star Blade's right arm at any time. It could then transform into a weapon again when facing an enemy, perfectly connecting with his soul. North Star Blade, who was staring at the platycodon in his hand, immediately stood up and landed on the ground. He then bowed to Tong Gua. "Get lost." At that moment, Tong Gua's image in his heart was incomparably lofty, shining like a god. "Good sword." North Star Blade's eyes flashed with a hint of passion as he looked at the sword. The blow had broken North Star Blade's right arm, but there was no blood flowing out of the wound. Platycodon, level 0. The right arm in Northstar Blade's soul had been torn apart and fused with his new arm. This was the most important material required for flesh casting. Weapon grade, Legendary 1. This feeling was very strange. There was no jerkiness or discomfort, as if this sword was a derivative of his flesh and consciousness. P.S. Northstar 1 Blade's weapon looks like a katana to us, but there is no such thing as a sword in Japan. Whether it's a katana or a sword, it's called a sword. The concept of a katana and a sword is very vague. For example, Sauron from One Piece uses a katana, a three-katana style. However, his goal is to become the world's greatest swordsman. Northstar 1 Blade's weapon is the same. When Ikazumi and the others saw this, they curiously gathered around Northstar 1 Blade and activated analysis to examine the Kikyo. Northstar Blade did not disappoint Tong Gua. He widened his eyes and began to whimper, but his eyes were filled with hysterical stubbornness. Tong Gua frowned slightly when he saw this. He picked up the hammer again and began hammering again. Hearing this, Northstar Blade was taken aback, then fell silent. "Wow, master, you're really a master!" Ikazumi could not help but jump with joy. Everyone was speechless. "Give it to me." Skill introduction. This skill comes with the weapon. After killing a monster, Kikyo can devour part of the target monster's soul to obtain weapon growth experience points. "You go start a fire." Tong Gua nodded in satisfaction as he squeezed his extremely hard right arm. He then turned to the ancient tree and ordered. As Northstar 1 Blade gripped the Kikyo, he felt as if he were connected to the sword by flesh and blood. While Tong Gua was forging the weapon, Ikazumi and the others trembled in fear. Tong Gua then continued to forge the weapon according to Northstar Blade's description. He constantly showed the weapon to Northstar Blade and asked about the areas that needed improvement. "Hey you, are you done with the smelting?" Tong Gua wiped his sweat and shouted at the ancient tree. Northstar Blade had fainted several times during this period. However, every time Tong Gua's hammer fell, he would still be awakened by the unbearable pain. In an instant the Kikyo flashed with a black light. The sword trembled slightly as if it was humming. Then, it suddenly left Tong Gua's hand and flew toward Northstar Blade. Looking at Northstar Blade's miserable appearance, they were all in pain. At this moment, they were very glad that they did not choose to forge the body with blood and flesh and escaped the disaster. Upon hearing that, Ikazumi and the others who had a nervous look on their faces were stunned. "Please continue." "I'm sorry for disturbing you." Ikazumi quickly bowed and apologized. I'm sorry, I was too engrossed and thought that my hand was." Ikazumi blushed and seemed to be at a loss. However, what they did not know was that even if they wanted to, Lu Wu would never agree. However, it was different this time. Tong Gua admired Northstar Blade for being able to endure until now. Moreover, he was very interested in the new forging method of flesh and wanted to see what kind of weapon he could forge. The last special ability was invincible in their eyes. It could learn new abilities as the player grew, as if it had a life of its own. Tong Gua waved his hand indifferently. "Don't give me that, this is what annoys me the most." At this moment, Tong Gua looked at Northstar Blade. After the last process of quenching was completed, Tong Gua scooped up the tachi from the special cooling water. Tong Gua naturally would not lower himself to the little girl's level. He bent down and picked up Northstar Blade's broken arm. The weaponsmith was stunned. Covered by the weaponsmith, Tong Gua was stunned when he heard this, but then a smile appeared on his face. Although the materials for this weapon were all provided by Lu Wu, he was happy to make a profit. After that, it was the most crucial moment. "It's just soul coins. I'm very pleased to see such a persevering young man." Tong Gua smiled faintly, but his heart was bleeding. He did not even get paid for his hard work. Inscription of talent, special. If this weapon were to be sold, they could not imagine how much it would fetch. "Master, Can my hair be used to forge a legendary weapon? Ikazumi was envious. Seeing that Tong Gua seemed very happy, she asked while the iron was hot. Oh right, master, how many soul coins does this weapon cost? Ikazumi suddenly asked nervously. At this moment, Gu Dashu was still looking at Tong Gua with admiration. He could not believe that he had participated in the forging of a legendary weapon. He was full of admiration for Tong Gua. Initial weapon: Soul Lust passive, Transmogrification active, Inscription of Talent special passive. This master did not charge a single cent for the hard work of forging this weapon. Gu Dashu was full of admiration for his strength and character. I can't imagine if this weapon can learn dozens of skills when it reaches level 1000. Doesn't that mean it will become a skill launcher? Ikazumi could not help but murmur as she looked at Kikyo. Then, everyone's eyes were focused on Ikazumi. This weapon was too powerful, and it was a legendary weapon that had never appeared in the entire Asia server. Ahem. I've never cared about money when I forge weapons. Money is just a passing cloud to me. It's not easy for him to endure such extreme pain. I admire his perseverance, so I'll waive the forging fee this time. After a while, he raised his head and said in a serious tone, I'll pay for it. Although Tong Gua was usually frivolous, he was very serious when he was in the zone. Under his hammering, North Star Blade's right arm had become transparent, and the internal blood vessels were clearly visible. Hearing this, Atami Inoue and the others looked nervous. Obviously, they knew that the price of this weapon was extremely high. The pain was driving North Star Blade crazy, but he gritted his teeth and persevered. Free. Bam! North Star Blade bent over and stood up. He reached out his left hand and took the Kikyo. Tong Gua nodded and made one last stroke on the sword with the engraving knife in his hand, imprinting the two words. North Star Blade nodded and began to describe the shape of the heartless pill. He repeated the process until Ikazumi, who was standing at the side, felt that she was almost scared to death. Her face was pale. Upon hearing Tong Gua's words, Gu Dashu let out a soft cry and took out the spiritual ores that had been refined into liquid metal from the furnace. He placed them into 3 different containers and came to Tong Gua's side. At this moment, Ikazumi and the others grimaced in pain. They could not bear to look at it. Tong Gua raised the legendary forging hammer high. Rainbow light flashed on the surface of the hammer. As Tong Gua shouted, the hammer fell. Thank you for the weapon, master. Skill introduction. Sword at will. As the wielder's sword heart solidifies and grows, this weapon will also derive sword moves and special skills that match the wielder's sword will. This skill is related to the wielder's own talent. Since it had begun, Tong Gua was already in the zone. Naturally, he would not stop halfway, even if North Star Blade was suffering extreme pain. He immediately took out some ice attribute spiritual materials that could cool down. He crushed them and covered North Star Blade's right arm, which was still steaming. Don't worry, it's not done yet. Under North Star Blade's astonished gaze, Tong Gua took out a new tool, the engraving knife, from the channel and began to engrave runes on the weapon. Hammering, pouring in new liquid metal, hammering, pouring in. At this moment, the smile on Tong Gua's face froze. What do you think? My craftsmanship is not bad, right? Tong Gua smiled proudly. Meanwhile, the forging continued. In an instant, a black light flowed from the hilt to the tip of the sword. The sharp edge flashed and disappeared. By the way, what's the name of your weapon? Buzz. Buzz. The sword trembled. Originally, this process was unnecessary. However, the flesh casting was different. The runes that Tong Gua had engraved this time were the soul reassembly, which he had learned from the flesh casting instruction manual. Soul Lust passive. This time, North Star Blade had agreed to the flesh casting because of his uniqueness. He had lost his right arm in reality, and the loss of this part of his soul did not affect him. Hence, Lu Wu made an exception and gave him a chance. Kid, do you have any other requirements for the weapon? Kikyu. Hiss! Under everyone's curious gaze, Tong Gua made a cut on Northstar Blade's right arm and poured the liquid metal of the 3 different metals into it. At this moment, Tong Gua suddenly turned his head to look at Northstar Blade. The subsequent transformation ability also meant that Northstar Blade still had his right arm, but he would have to remove it during the battle. Hiss! As Northstar Blade described, the weapon gradually took shape. This time, Tong Gua was particularly serious. Usually, when players asked him to forge customized weapons, he would do it perfunctorily. He would not put in any effort if he could. That was because the ability of this weapon was too overpowered in their eyes. Moreover, he was very clear about the price of the spiritual materials used to forge the weapon just now. Weapon Introduction: a soul-growing weapon forged using the ancient flesh casting method. It has the ability to grow along with the player. After that, it was Tong Gua's personal show. The combination of various hammer techniques and materials dazzled the audience. Upon seeing the weapon's attributes, Ikazumi and the others revealed looks of disbelief. Weapon characteristics: indestructible level 10, below God level, undroppable, untradeable, can grow, Glancing at Northstar Blade's right arm that had become transparent, he looked at Tong Gua in a different way. His eyes were filled with admiration. However, just as he was about to ask for an exorbitant price, Lu Wu's voice rang in his mind. Skill Introduction: after using this skill, the Kikyu can be changed into the form of a right arm or a sword. Transformation active. Hearing this, Atomy Inoue and the others also showed a look of envy on their faces. Half an hour later, the surface of Northstar Blade's right arm flickered with a dark light, revealing a heavy metallic aura. At this moment, the master blacksmith suddenly came to his side and put his arm around his shoulder.